Ventura County Board of Supervisors on April 28th. Given that the proposed project is consistent with established regulations, staff recommends that the ALUC determine that the proposed action is consistent with the ACLEP. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and also representatives from the County Planning Department are here to help answer any questions, and Naval Base Ventura County. Thank you. Oh, I believe you need to open the public hearing.
Public comments and gonna open up for public comments during this public hearing on this item. So if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this item,
We did receive a written public comment that I will read into the record.
perfect.
This public comment is from Kendall Lucine, which is here today joining us if you have any further questions. For the administrative record, my name is Kendall Lucine, and I am the Installation Community Planning Liaison Officer for the Naval Base, Ventura County, California. On behalf of my commanding officer, Captain Daniel Brown of the Naval Base, Ventura County, we would like to take this opportunity to express our strong support of the proposed recommendations described in item 10 of today's VCTC meeting agenda packet. NBVC has been working in unison with the County of Ventura Resource Management Agency Planning Division to develop the language articulated in the draft zoning ordinance amendments, planning project application forms, and supporting materials to implement this comprehensive military land use compatibility roadmap initiative for the County of Ventura. Furthermore, we strongly recommend that the Airport Land Use Commission and VCTC Board of Commissioners unanimously approve the MLUC roadmap initiative provided in item 10 of the agenda packet. Thank you for receiving our public comment in advance of today's public hearing on item 10. Should VCTC Board of Commissioners or agency staff have any questions for CPLO or need additional information from NBVC pertaining to item 10 exhibits 1 through 7, please advise them to contact me by phone and email. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the president? Any comments? All right. Then at this time, I'm going to close the public.
Chair, I have just a quick question.
Go for it.
Thank you. I know that there's a lot of autonomous aerial vehicle testing going on. Is this plan consistent with the needs of the base for those types of testing?
I would rely on Kendall to answer that question, I think. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to make sure that this plan that we have out here also will meet the needs for the autonomous aerial vehicles that's being tested in the area.
If you could, please come up to the mic to answer.
Good morning, everyone. Just to put a face to the name, my name is Kendall Lucine. I'm the Community Plans and Liaison Officer. Amanda Fagan is my predecessor. And yeah, so in response to your question, that is something I have to check specifically with our Air Ops and Air Traffic Control Operations Officer. Both of them are in a training in San Diego, but I can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to close the public hearing at this time, since there doesn't seem to be any more questions or comments. So we're going to move on. This is going to have to be a vote, correct? All right. We have a motion.
Second, White.
There we go. Motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Commissioner Anderson? Yes. Commissioner Brogy?
Yes.
Commissioner Crosswhite? Yes. Commissioner Enegren,
Yes.
Commissioner Engler,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorell, Commissioner Halter,
Yes.
Commissioner Levere,
Yes.
Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner MacArthur,
Yes.
Commissioner Lang,
Yes.
Commissioner Parvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair McQueen Lejeune,
Yes.
Chair Judge.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. We're going to move on to item number 11, which is Quiet Zones presentation. And this will be put on by Claire Grassley.
Good morning, Commissioners. I will be introducing some staff from the FRA, but just wanted to acknowledge this presentation was requested by Commissioner Parvin. There are an opportunity for some quiet zones, particularly in right-of-way that VCTC owns, which is from the Moore Park Station to the LA County line. There are two that the city of Moore Park is looking at currently, which is at Moore Park Avenue and at Spring Street. And then also there are four that will be part of the Simi Valley Double Track once that project progresses into construction. So a total of six in that area. I'm sure there'll be more in the future. And while we don't own the right-of-way west of Moore Park and Union Pacific does, I think there's still some interest potentially in some quiet zones in that area as well. So there's certainly been progress with those two cities in particular. And so we wanted to bring this to the commission so that there is, we could share this information with the commission at large. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Sarah Logan and Felipe Ayala, who will be giving this presentation, and then we'll all be here to answer your questions.
Good morning, Commissioners. We appreciate the invitation, and thank you to Claire. We're with the Federal Railroad Administration. Again, my name is Felipe Ayala. This is Sarah Logan. We're both with the Grade Crossing and Trespasser Outreach Group for District 7, which is California, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. There's actually four of us and one supervisor, so we cover this whole district in regards to grade crossing and especially anything that has to do with the quiet zones. We're going to provide a brief understanding of who we are and what we do, and then we'll go over a little bit of accident stats, also the purpose of the regulation, and then we'll kind of work our way down the regulation. This is not intended to be a full comprehensive understanding of the regulation. What we wanted to do was basically provide you with a brief understanding of what this regulation actually entails and in regards to establishing a quiet zone. This is our FRA's mission as a whole. We concentrate with that second bullet there, partnering with stakeholders to mitigate grade crossing accidents and trespasser fatalities. And that is like the core component of our particular group. So this is what they refer to sometimes as a train horn rule. Basically, it's to maintain, its main intention is to provide safety at all grade crossings. And here are some the beginning of some of the stats. What we like to use in regards to mitigate some of these accidents is the 3E framework, which is education, engineering, and enforcement. The stats show that every 3 hours there's a trespasser hit by a train. This is one of the leading causes of rail-related deaths. The second leading cause of rail-related deaths is actually vehicle collisions at the grade crossings. These are national stats. If you kind of look at these stats, you can see that it's a 5-year snapshot and it's been trending upwards, unfortunately. Nationwide, these stats actually show that 8 people or vehicles are hit by a train daily. And California usually tops the list, and then usually followed by Florida. And part of the reason for that is just because of the amount of the concentrated rail network through urban areas. But in regards to fatalities, California unfortunately leads it. And for trespasser fatalities, it's also the same. One thing that we do notice is that the incident rates are actually higher in Texas, but the fatality rates were actually higher in California. When we kind of narrow these stats down to our district, you know, it almost paints the same picture. So we do have our work cut out for us, and that's part of the reason why we do what we do. So what is the train horn rule? What it does is it basically provides the requirements for sounding the locomotive train horn as they're approaching and occupying and passing through these grade crossings. And you know, these are the requirements. So there is a time-based requirement. There's also a pattern requirement, and there's also a distance and speed component. There it goes. Sorry about that. I don't know if this battery's gone dead, but now there is one thing to understand, that regardless of a quiet zone, there are situations where the locomotive horn will be sound by, and that discretion is left up to the engineer. And these are some of the emergency situations that would trigger the sounding of a horn, regardless if it was a quiet zone or not. And it's important to understand that as you're kind of moving through the process. You know, so the discretion is left up to the engineer. You know, sometimes you'll have individuals, trespassers, you know, animals, vehicles close to the tracks. If there's a crossing device that's malfunctioning, that'll trigger the sounding of the horn as well. They have rules that they need to comply with in regards to that. Roadway worker protection, that's employees that are working on or about the tracks. They also have a requirement that they have to sound the horn to alert them. And then if there's any other special operating rules that may supersede the quiet zone. These are some of the minimum requirements in regards to establishing a quiet zone. There is a length component. There's also, if you have a pedestrian and a private crossing, they have to be within a quarter. If they're within a quarter mile, they have to be included in that quiet zone. As far as the quiet zone is concerned, it has to be bookended. It can be bookended either by a pedestrian crossing or a public crossing, but again, they have to be within a quarter mile of each other. And if the quiet zone crosses multiple jurisdictions, one thing that's important to understand is that one of the jurisdictions is going to basically have to be selected to be like the manager of that quiet zone. And of course, you know, there's requirements that all the signage and pavement markings and everything have to meet the most current California MUTCD. So who may establish the quiet zone? The quiet zones are established by the public authority. So whichever public authority is you know, actually the one that's in need of the quiet zone, they're the ones that are going to take the lead and basically begin the process of complying with this regulation. And that also means that that particular public authority will be responsible for all the maintenance and management of that quiet zone. Now, there's two ways that this quiet zones can be established. The first one is the public authority designation. So if the quiet zone itself meets all the requirements, and there's the what we call SSMs, and I'll kind of go over these acronyms. We are a federal agency, so we love acronyms. But the SSMs are supplemental safety measures. If all the public grade crossings within this quiet zone have those implementations, then the public authority can designate the quiet zone. If you do not meet that criteria, then what will happen is the public authority will then have to provide an application for the quiet zone, which then FRA would have to approve. And again, we love acronyms, so I just wanted to kind of go over a little bit of these definitions, because you will see these throughout the entire regulation, and these are the main ones. The first one is the SSMs, which is a supplemental safety measures, and those are safety measures found at grade crossings that are approved by FRA. There is an appendix in the regulations which describes every one of them. They all come with like a scoring system, so you know, once you're kind of going through the whole process, that scoring system will be used to determine whether you meet the thresholds for the approval. The rest of these are also like thresholds. They all have calculations in them. FRA actually offers a what we call the grade crossing calculator, and it's free to the public. So all the formulas are already built in. So you would use that calculator to input all the information from all the grade crossings, and it'll just spit out all the information and tell you, these are your thresholds, you do qualify or you do not qualify. So we try to make it as simple as possible. So you could actually run those calculations before you even move on to any process. So that way you'll kind of have a immediate understanding of whether it's even feasible to do this, or what is it actually going to take to obtain an approval of the quiet zone. And again, these are some of the qualifying conditions. As I mentioned, for the public designation, if you have the SSMs at all the public crossings. And the key thing with all these thresholds is the quiet zone risk index. All these other thresholds have to be less than or equal to in order to gain that approval. So these are just some of the examples of the approved SSMs. And again, you'll find these in the appendix within the regulation, and it'll describe them, and it'll also provide you with like the scoring system in there as well. So, you know, of course, temporary closures, so there's a whole criteria to meet that. 4-quadrant gate systems, gates with medians and channelizations, one-way streets, and of course, we always emphasize that, you know, permanent closures, if at all possible, that's probably the best way to do this. But all of these have, you know, different scoring criteria, and it's all in the regulation, and it'll provide all that information in the appendix as well. And we also have alternative safety measures. So basically what these are like modified versions of the SSMs, and they also have a scoring criteria. And the appendix will also provide that information in regards to how they score them and what type of score you will be obtaining if you're using like some of the ones that the FRA actually has in the regulation. But the public authority is responsible to submit their estimates of the effectiveness in the application for the quiet zone approval. So then what will happen is if you have SSMs and when you apply in your application, FRA will take your application, review your entire application, and they'll kind of go through your scoring system, and then sometimes FRA may give you a higher score, or they may give you a lesser score. So, and, you know, FRA will have their own engineers kind of go through the whole system, and then we can kind of compare notes, and then you'll receive feedback, and then we'll kind of move along through the approval process. Two of the major notices for the quiet zone. The first one is always the notice of intent. What this does is this provides just a brief detail. There's like 5 components for this notice of intent. What it does is it notifies the entire stakeholders that are going to be affected by the quiet zone. You have to provide notice to them and basically saying, hey, we're looking at a quiet zone here. This is these are the crossings that we're looking at. This is why. This is kind of like our safety mitigation measures, and notify them. The second one is the notice of intent. Once you get past the notice of establishment, once you get past the notice of intent, then you get into the notice of establishment. And I'll kind of cover these here in the next couple of slides. So the NOI, you know, it has 5 components, and again, you have to provide this to all the stakeholders. So they all need to be identified in this notice of intent. And, you know, some of the components within the NOI is it does have a timing requirement, and part of the reason for the timing requirement is to ensure that everybody has all the stakeholders have an opportunity to comment and voice any concerns moving through the process. And then you'll find the required content. So it makes it pretty simple. It kind of lays it out for you in regards to what needs to be identified and described within the notice of intent. And again, you know, it has a comment period to allow all the stakeholders to submit comments, concerns, and any other issues. The notice of establishment. Again, this also has a timing component, and this one's a little more comprehensive because by this point you've already gone through your notice of intent and addressed any issues that any of the stakeholders have brought forth, and establish all your safety measures. So now you're saying once you get to this point is that we are ready to execute. We have everything in place, and now we want to establish this quiet zone. And again, this one has 11 measures, 11 items that are required to go through this process. One thing that is required is a diagnostic team review. So basically what the diagnostic team is, it's a group of all the stakeholders involved. And what occurs there is, we have team meetings and we go through every single crossing, actually have field visits out there, discuss all the safety measures, any improvements that need to be made. And, that entire team kind of walks through the entire process and from beginning to end to ensure that everything was met. And then once everybody is satisfied, then we move through the end phases. So what it looks like is you have your NOE, you have your time frame that goes through the comment period. Then you move it towards your NOE, and this is when, in the NOE is where you're going to set the date that the horns will cease. So we also highly recommend that that there be a public education outreach campaign to inform the public of the ceasing of the train horns within that area. A lot of the public might be used to hearing the horns. They may be living there their entire lives, and then all of a sudden, no horns one day. So it's important that we start educating the public, ahead of time, especially, in certain areas you may have schools and industrial areas and other public areas. So it's important that, that's taken into consideration and it's also included as part of the plan with the diagnostic team.
And I just want to add, California Operation Lifesaver has an excellent outreach program already set in place. They've worked a lot with the entire state, obviously, and have also done a lot with Ventura County. So they can assist with geofencing, provide you with already made materials that you can hand out to your community members to make sure that they're aware of a future quiet zone and just be aware of public safety.
There are some, once the quiet zone is established, there is a required periodic update, and there's A and B, and it depends on how that quiet zone was established. So one of them allows you, 4.5 to 5 years in between the periodic update. The other one is 2 to 3 years. And basically, it depends on, what type of safety measures were implemented when you establish a quiet zone. The requirements are for the letter of affirmation is to make sure that all the grade crossing inventory forms are all up to date for all the crossings within that quiet zone. Ensure that the traffic counts are all up to date as well. And it needs to be sent to our FRA office and then along to the stakeholders. There are some items that may result in the termination of the quiet zone. One FRA, can take the opportunity to review some of these quiet zones and run the calculations to ensure that they're still meeting the thresholds. One of the triggering mechanisms usually is if the corridor is experiencing a high level of accidents, whether it's trespasser or grade crossing accidents. So that'll usually trigger us to look at these quiet zones and kind of start looking at the numbers and the thresholds to make sure that that is still meeting those thresholds. So then what'll happen is if we find an issue with any of those items, then what we'll do is we'll reach out to whoever's in charge of this quiet zone, and we'll start discussing it with them and then start looking for an action plan to address those issues. If those issues are not addressed and we have certain timeframes that we'll establish, then what we'll do is we start moving towards basically the removal of the quiet zone.
The city can also at any time decide, this is too much, and they can terminate the quiet zone on their own as well. You just have to notify all stakeholders, the same stakeholders that you've continuously been in contact with in the whole entire process.
And if it is a quiet zone that's like multi-jurisdictional, and let's just say one of the public authorities decides that we don't want to be part of this quiet zone any longer, then what will happen is that portion may be removed, and the remainder of that quiet zone corridor will have to be recalculated as a new quiet zone, basically. And then we'll have to establish again, like, who's going to be the public authority that's going to be the responsible manager of this quiet zone. And then, if there's ever any changes to the point of contact for the quiet zone, we would like to have those updates as well, just to make sure that we always have an updated point of contact so we can discuss any issues moving forward.
Because as these quiet zones are established, we as FRA inspectors come and inspect those on a yearly basis. And if we find anything wrong, we do need to have somebody to contact and let them know, is there signage wrong? Is the pavement markings, are those faded? The quiet zones need to stay in shape for the entirety of the quiet zone.
We try to keep this as simplified as best we could because the regulation is very heavy. But you know, I know it's a lot to digest. But you know, we're here to assist in any way we can in regards to interpretation of the regulation. Most public authorities, when they're moving forward to establishing a quiet zone, they'll hire a contractor. There's a few that are. I mean, this is all that they do, so they're very fluent. They know everybody, and it makes the process a little easier that way. But you know, ultimately, the public authority is responsible to maintain and ensure compliance with with the regulation. Do you have anything else? I think that was it.
Oh, do you guys have any questions for us?
Thank you very much for that presentation. It's very interesting to me, being from Simi Valley, and I'm sure it is for Supervisor Parvin too, for being from Moore Park. Any questions for the president? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So do cities bear the responsibility or the liability for any accidents that happen because of trespassing, or is it only on the actual intersections? For like a train accident, you know, down the tracks in a quiet zone, where it's basically a trespassing issue?
Well, in regards to if there's a quiet zone established, then yes, because you know, the way we see it is that the city or the public authority is responsible to ensure a safe corridor for this quiet zone. So you know, if there's fencing, there's issues, or
Speak in the microphone.
you know, a big issue.
want you
with-
to speak in
Oh,
the-
sorry. If there's an issue with trespassing, heavy trespassing in that area, then we'll ask the city, you know, for an action plan with like mitigation measures in order to reduce and/or eliminate these issues.
Okay, because one of the issues that we were talking about in Moore Park is a liability, and it's something that we can't get a really good answer on. I know on the intersections, we have the pedestrian gates where you can't just walk out into the tracks and you're pretty much blocked in, which is very safe. But, you know, half mile down, the tracks are not fenced off anywhere. And you get homeless people going in and out, people on drugs sometimes, train accidents happen. So in areas like that, I'm just wondering if we have a quiet zone set up, but someone is trespassing on property of the railroad that shouldn't be happening in the first place, does that fall back on the city just because the train didn't blow its horn or didn't have to blow its horn when it actually should have when someone's on the tracks? Sounds kind of confusing, but
So
a lot of layers
engineer
on
is
it.
going to still sound the horn. If
Right.
they see somebody on the tracks, they're going to sound the horn. But when you're doing a quiet zone, you are taking every measure that you can to make sure that that corridor is safe. And so, yes, the city is accepting responsibility, liability within that quiet zone corridor.
Okay, so have you seen other cities in the past put more fencing up along the tracks in areas that are away from the traffic too? Or is it,
Yeah, actually, currently, I think it was Flagstaff.
Flagstaff.
Flagstaff, you know, they went through a lot of looking for funding and everything else to seal this corridor because for that very reason, they were actually having a lot of trespasser strikes through that area.
okay, because in the
So,
past,
you know-
we've had a few of those, we've had some suicides, and I know when lawyers get involved, it becomes a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Go.
No, go ahead. You were actually. Sorry, when you're specifying quiet zones, and I think we have some in Ventura County, is it all day or is it only at certain times? Can you decipher with that on the policy? I just wanted to get a clarification.
So typically, when the quiet zones here are 24-hour quiet zones. They can do them as well, like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. The railroads kind of frown upon that because they have to retrain, you know, their engineers and conductors, like, okay, now you can't sound the horn here, but you can sound it at this time. So the majority of them are 24 hours a day.
Thank you.
Mr. Parvin?
Thank you. A question about, are you seeing any increase in requests for quiet zones in your district?
I would say yes, because I feel like, you know, as public authorities are kind of establishing them, you know, the word's kind of getting out, and especially with a lot of the like the recent planning projects where they're trying to build more pedestrian-friendly areas. So it's like in the Bay Area, and then I know even up in Modesto, they have a big plan to try to bring in the commuter trains and then, kind of build this whole little pedestrian area, live and work and travel at the same area.
Exactly.
So, I would say yes.
Transit-oriented development. And I know the governor really wants to build more housing, and with what you just talked about, it kind of confirms that we could be looking at this county-wide, not just specific areas, but anywhere where there is a railroad. I'm not trying to put pedestrians at risk, but I think we could be looking at those properties. Maybe some of them could be rezoned. But I think one of the negatives, because of the horns at 3 a.m., can not be indicative of moving into a housing unit nearby. So there's got to be a way for us to find unique solutions, and this is one of them. Create quiet zones in areas that it's safe. The liability part could be shared amongst other groups, right? Other cities. But if we look at it from a countywide or even regional perspective, it could be really helpful and advantageous to all of us. Because there are some areas that I've been looking around our county on this item, thinking in terms of quiet zones. If you created them, you could build more housing in some areas that are not zoned for housing right now, but they could be, and we could build more homes. So that's really why I really wanted to look at this from a bigger perspective than just the Moore Park-Simi perspective, but definitely I'm going to lead the charge on the Moore Park-Simi side of things. But I think we should all be looking at our cities in the county for areas where we could build more housing.
I would like to say one thing that, and Felipe already touched on it, if you have a high unhoused population, that is going to negate the quiet zone because they're going to constantly be sounding the horn. So it's imperative that you get that under control and move them to an area where they're not going to be trespassing onto the railroad tracks.
Question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Excellent report, and Commissioner Parvin brought up a lot of really good points. I want to bring up some other good points, some different points. I sit on the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency as the commissioner representing this organization, and I seem to get emails about twice a month, and they're called incident reports. And as was spoken earlier, they're from people who just want to end their lives or want to, that are in the wrong place at the wrong time, so to speak. And I think we need to kind of be aware that if we quiet everything, that there's going to be some human life out there that's going to be taken off the streets. And I hate to see that, you know. The Pacific Surfliner runs 351 miles from San Diego to San Luis Obispo. And this is when I get these reports all up and down that line. And I get them at least once a month, maybe twice a month. And I don't want this to close off that situation where the quiet zones eliminate any problems down the road, down the rail, I should say, because if we make everything too quiet, and I appreciate what you're saying, Commissioner Parvin, that people aren't aware that there's a train going by. And I know that from sitting on this commission with Lausanne, the Pacific Surfliners, what I'm talking about, there are people that don't, let's say the engineers can't stop a train, whether they see them or not. And you can blow the horn all you want, and that person's not going to get off or whatever. So I just want to bring in maybe some sort of a awareness that trespassers and people who decide to end their life for whatever reason, that we don't eliminate the safety part of it. Because in reading the report, there was talk about, well, this is going to cost X amount of dollars or whatever like that. I don't think we can spend enough money to make the railroad safe. And whether we make them all quiet zones or some quiet zones, or we eliminate how often the horn blows, I'm not sure what we can do. I mean, California, once again, is leading the road in what's going on. And it's just, it's kind of depressing for me every time I get this email. And I don't want the quiet zones to eliminate, not eliminate, but to increase the concern for the people out there, one way or the other. So thank you, but a great report, and thank you, Commissioner Parvin.
Go ahead.
Great, thank you, great report. Just so I have clarity, are there currently quiet zones right now? Or is this a new concept?
Oh, yes, there is. Actually, in California, there's like 89 of them.
Okay, so in the county of Ventura, would you say, how many would be in the county of Ventura? Currently, approximately? 10?
There isn't
think
any.
there's any right now.
There's none at
any
all.
currently in
Okay,
this
I'm
county,
sorry.
no.
That's why I wasn't sure if we're just introducing it or not. Just being in Ventura, we have a lot of housing right up against, especially in West Ventura and Midtown Ventura. And one of the biggest problems we have is that people constantly cut the fencing between the neighborhoods so they can have access to the beach. Because we really only have 4 access points in Ventura as a coastal city to get to our coastline. And so they use that over and over and over again. So I can see that being a problem. I know, let's see, for me, I know we're all different, but I gotta tell you, when I hear the horns, it makes me want to travel. Okay, so I actually like them, except when it's foggy, they seem a lot louder. And I'm wondering, in the quiet zones, when there is an incident, how does that impact the future of that quiet zone, other than fixing how somebody may have accessed that track that made it unsafe for them? What is that process?
Typically, what'll happen is part of. Let me just back up a little bit. Part of our job currently is to investigate accidents on railroad property, trespassing, specifically trespassing and grade crossing accidents. So we also we get those reports daily, federal and the state OES reports. So that's part of the driving mechanism that we use to start our investigations. So and then to answer your question. Part of what'll happen is if there's accidents in a quiet zone, that's the first thing that we look at. Where did this accident occur? Then we start looking if there's trends in that area, whether it's in that crossing or in that quiet zone or maybe within that area of the quiet zone. But if there's a situation where we start seeing an uptick of accidents within the quiet zone, then that's when we'll start recalculating everything and kind of start looking at whether something else needs to be done within this quiet zone. Because sometimes things change. Maybe there wasn't a housing complex there when it was initially established, and now there's a school nearby, so you're getting more pedestrians. So we might need to look at this whole revisit the entirety of this quiet zone once again. Yeah. But usually, if it's within the quiet zone, we'll start asking the question, why? Even if it's one, why did this occur? Well, now the fencing's all down, or maybe some other issue occurred.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And thanks again for the report and the clarity.
Any other questions? Okay. Commissioner Crosswhite.
Yeah, and I don't know, you may not have an answer to these questions, but I was just thinking about the aspects of this, because I was reading the report that there's supplemental insurance that's required in addition to taking on the liability. So do you know anything about the process of the local agency getting that supplemental insurance that's specific to the liability?
I do not.
No, we don't.
Okay.
I don't think that's anything that we would touch upon.
Claire will.
I'll say the city of Moore Park has done a tremendous job really looking into this. They're the first ones to really the furthest along in the process. And we'd be happy to send out their staff report because it covers a lot of that. But my understanding is that you're not required to purchase supplemental insurance, but there is supplemental insurance that is available. I think the city of Moore Park, I think they are looking for, even above that, really. Above that supplemental insurance, and has gone through the process of, I think it's CCIJPA, I can't remember the acronym, but that has this, and but they are also looking at a number of other insurers to see what is available. And so that's, I think, once we know more, we'd be happy to send that out to the commission. But there's a good deal of information regarding liability and additional supplemental insurance that is in the City of Moore Park staff report. And so I think we'd be happy to kind of send that out. That goes into further detail than this staff report that was more general. But there are options available. But I think every city has to kind of weigh that, that risk. And I think their staff report does a great job of also noting that in some cases, these improvements at crossings are actually can be safer than the existing situation, even with a horn. So if you have, a 4-quadrant gate system and, medians and things like that, those improvements can be, safer than sometimes the existing conditions with a horn. So it's very situational. I think every intersection is different. And so it's very hard to say any sort of blanket statement related to that. But these improvements can be good from a safety perspective regardless. But there's very significant liability considerations that each city would need to consider for every intersection.
And because each intersection is different, again, this is probably another subjective question, but what kind of cost per intersection sort of range are you looking at? Because, just to put in a crosswalk with some flashing lights is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So I'm looking at a railroad intersection and going, that can't be cheap.
No, it's not cheap, and again, yes, very situational. In the case of these two intersections in Moore Park, they are already gone through significant improvements that Metrolink did in the course of maintenance work and just general safety improvements. So they are already sealed corridors. The one on Spring Road already has the 4-quadrant gate system. The one on Moore Park Avenue doesn't, but has had significant improvements. So when this was brought to the Moore Park Council in 2017, those improvements had not been made. And it's much more feasible to do that now because those improvements have been made through, other existing projects. And that will be the case in the Simi Valley Double Track project. There are 4 intersections there that will be upgraded as part of that double track project. And so it is much, much more feasible to do that, to make them quiet zones when they're already, the improvements are already being taken care of, most of them. Usually you still will need things like striping and signage almost always. And so, those can be, usually I would almost, under $100,000. But if you're having to add in, 4-quadrant gate system, that can cost, a couple $1 million. So it just really depends, if you have, there's improvements being made at, on Front Street in Ventura, but it's still a dirt, parking lot. There's no medians. So if, you have an intersection where there isn't a median there currently, all of those things just add up. But if you have an existing intersection that has a median, that has 4-quadrant gate system, then it is going to be significantly cheaper. And so, I think that's exactly what the city of Moore Park looked at initially, that it was just cost prohibitive because those improvements would have been quite expensive. And then once they were already made separately, now it's much more feasible.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah. Sorry, another question for you on the horn part. So if a train station is within the quiet zone, is a train required to blow the horn when it goes into the train station? And also, are there any types of guarding that has to be put up with all the pedestrians next to the train station as well? Or does that stay the same?
Part of what will occur, I'll answer the second part first. Part of what will occur is during the diagnostic process, the entire team goes out and looks at every pedestrian crossing, anything that's involved. And that's where all the safety measures will be discussed in regards to what's necessary here to, to make this the safest for the public. So like at a train station, ensuring that if there's like a pedestrian crossing, in the middle of the station to get from one side to the other, do we have the proper gates? Or do we have the correct lights here at this location? Is the signage adequate? So those are the type of safety measures that will be discussed during the diagnostic team portion of the whole establishment process. For the first part of your question, when the train is going through the station, part of that will depend on what the railroad's rule is. So if the railroad says when you're approaching or when you're passing the station or approaching the station, the sound or the locomotive horn needs to be sounded. So we kind of have to look at those whole things and whether something needs to be changed there or not.
Okay, so one of the issues we have is that, I ask these questions like this and I can't get a good answer on it. But we got to go out and pay some company a ton of money to tell us if they're going to honk the horn at the train station, which is right next to the residential area that the whole train horn situation is supposed to be mitigated for. So I'm looking at this like, do we spend all this money to find out that the train is going to be blasting the horn the whole time because the train station is right in the middle of our quiet zone we're trying to do? Or do we not? And it's not a universal problem throughout the whole city. What we found out is that, looking at this whole thing, I thought that people would want this, to be something we'd look into. But as some of you have probably seen on the Ventura Star article, it blew up and there was like 1 million comments about, I love the train, don't take the horn away. So I looked at that like, wow, I didn't hear this going into this whole thing. So it's kind of tough for us right now. So we're right in the middle of this whole analysis and trying to get some good feedback from the area. But really, it's like, what does this look like when we do pay the money for it? And in 2017, it was cost prohibitive. I mean, like we said, it's like millions to put in a crossing gate. I mean, as we all know, it's millions to paint the street everywhere because it's just, the prices of things are crazy. And at that time, it wasn't something we were going to look into. Now that Metrolink has repaired most of those intersections and they're pretty much almost ready for a quiet zone, now we're looking at the liability part of it. And that's the part that also scares me. I mean, we get sued for uneven pavement, here and there. What's going to happen when we get sued for someone getting hit by a train? The intersections aren't something that really bothers me. It doesn't really happen there. It's usually down the tracks. So there's just a lot to know. And I wish there was more information out there without having to pay someone to give me the information. But that just seems like where we're at right now. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
And we could clarify from Metrolink, since they dispatched that area. I've asked that question, but I think I could get a more clear answer, and we'd be happy to provide that.
Thanks.
Martin?
Chair Judge, members, thank you for this presentation. I just wanted to quickly note, this is a great discussion. I think this is an issue that VCTC is obviously very involved with because we own a lot of rail assets, especially on the Coast Main Line. We own 3 stations outright, the Camarillo Station, its parking lots, the Moore Park Station and its parking lots, and the Montalvo Station in Ventura, and the platform in the Simi Valley Station. So I think it's also reflective of our partnerships with each city and with Metrolink, and appreciate Commissioner Parvin bringing this issue up, and I know Commissioner Enegren and I have talked about this at length too. I think part of the takeaway, it is situational to each area. I will say, having been in Flagstaff before, I was amazed the amount of freight traffic, mostly BNSF freight trains coming through, no horn, and it was a bustling, Friday night, and it seemed they were finding a way to make it work. They're probably adding more safety measures in, but I think as long as we look at this, holistically and take every step to make sure we're making it as safe as possible, we'll have a great product. Because I got to say, that Moore Park High Street development, I was just there yesterday morning, is amazing. It's a great TOD project, and Simi Valley has projects there and potential for that, and Camarillo may at some point in the future. So this is a great discussion. Just wanted to say thank you, and thank you, Claire, and the transit team for bringing Felipe and Sarah here.
Go ahead.
I just have one final question. I actually have hundreds of questions, but we don't have that much time. The question is, how often have you terminated quiet zones? And it seems like if you evaluate them every 3 years or 4 years, you go out and look again and look at stats, then you decide whether or not they should be terminated or improvements they could make. So is there a lot of terminations once somebody has established a quiet zone?
I haven't had any terminations. We can suspend a quiet zone. We did suspend one in San Diego. So once it is established, we, like I said, we come out every year. We do an inspection. We make sure that everything still meets the requirements, and then we let you know. There's going to be signage to fix, pavement markings to be fixed. But the one in San Diego, if you don't respond to us and work with us, it could get suspended. And then, could lead to termination.
Great.
I would say maybe in the last 3 years, I can't think of one that was actually terminated, but I would say at least 3 to 4 that were suspended for a period of time due to lack of
Fencing,
full effort by the
signage.
public authority who's managing that. But we do provide them with everything at our disposal at our disposal to for them to bring everything up to compliance and maintain their quiet zone.
Well, I appreciate you coming out, and I really appreciate Claire for all the work that she does on this as well. So thank you. More to come.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions, real quick? No, thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you to the commission and thank you to Claire for having us. We appreciate your time.
All right, we're going to move on to item 12, which is the Santa Paula Branch Line Master Plan Update. This will be put on by Amanda Fagan.
Good morning, Chair Judge, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Amanda Fagan, and I serve as the Director of Planning and Sustainability here at VCTC. The item before you now is an update on the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail Master Plan and Environmental Impact Report. For today's presentation, I will provide just a very brief update and overview on the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail Master Plan and EIR project. Then I will talk about trail compatibility, the environmental impact report process, and community engagement. So when VCTC originally acquired the Santa Paula Branch Line nearly 3 decades ago for use as a multimodal corridor, plans included a bicycle and hiking trail among the stated purposes. In 1996, VCTC adopted the Santa Paula Branch Line Master Plan, which included design guidelines and plans for a trail. Then in 2000, VCTC adopted a master plan and environmental impact report for the Santa Paula Branch Line Recreational Multi-Use Trail. The plan provides design guidelines, preliminary engineering, and a preferred alignment for the trail. So in the intervening years, 3 trail segments have been constructed in the cities of Santa Paula and Fillmore and in the unincorporated Piru community. With increased public interest in active transportation opportunities, in April of 2022, the Commission adopted a goal to reinvigorate the process to complete the Santa Paula Branch Line Bike Trail. And in 2023, the Commission adopted a strategic plan that includes an update to the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail Master Plan to validate trail alignment, connections, and amenities, and update existing conditions to facilitate trail completion with stakeholder engagement. In 2024, VCTC applied for and received a Surface Transportation Block Grant and a Regional Early Action Planning Grant from the Southern California Association of Governments to update the Trail Master Plan from Saticoy to Piru. Then, following a competitive procurement process, the Commission approved a contract with WSP in March of 2025. To prepare an update to the Trail Master Plan and a new environmental document. As a reminder, the Trail Master Plan update and EIR are funded through a $134,000 grant from SCAG and a $1.6 million grant from the Surface Transportation Block Grant. This effort will update the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail Master Plan and prepare a new environmental document. This is a Rails with Trails project where a multi-use path is planned to run primarily along the railroad tracks with continued active rail operations. The photo on this slide illustrates an example of what the trail might look like and is for discussion purposes only. It does not represent the final design of the trail. The Trail Master Plan update presents an opportunity to invest in active transportation connections to housing, transit, education, and job centers throughout the Santa Clara River Valley, provide abundant opportunities for educational, interpretive, and scenic connections, and reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions while addressing agricultural compatibility concerns. The project objectives on this slide come directly from the original master plan, and I believe they're still valid, but at the same time, we do have the opportunity to update or amend the objectives as needed through the master planning process. This map depicts the various planning areas for the Santa Paula Branch Line corridor. The branch line begins at the East Ventura Montalvo Metrolink station and continues for 32 miles through Santa Paula, Fillmore, and Piru. Existing completed trail sections are shown in blue, and in yellow, the 4-mile Ventura segment. The area in yellow is the 4-mile Ventura segment, and the areas shown in orange are the Santa Paula extension segments. The red sections are the primary focus of the Trail Master Plan update. And it covers an approximately 27 miles from Satakoy Depot through to the end of the corridor beyond Piru. Areas that connect existing trail segments and the Heritage Valley communities with one another and eventually create connections to the coast. To complete the trail, we do face a number of challenges related to constraints on the right-of-way, bridges and crossings, and addressing concerns regarding compatibility with adjacent agricultural activities. As you've probably heard me say before, and I'm sure I'll say again, if this project were easy, it would be done already. At the same time, we do also have opportunities to build on existing studies, connect to existing and planned trails, and to incorporate historic and educational elements into trail design and implementation. A primary focus of the Trail Master Plan update is to explore and incorporate trail compatibility considerations and features. VCTC has long been aware of concerns from agricultural interests regarding use of the branch line corridor for a trail. Some of the concerns expressed by agricultural landowners and interests have included vandalism, litter, increased liability, trespass, potential loss of ag operator ability to cross the corridor, and the potential loss of existing farmland to buffers between recreational and agricultural uses. The original master plan and EIR include design features and mitigations to address these concerns. However, in response to agricultural concerns, a 15-year agreement between VCTC, the county, and property owners adjacent to the branch line prevented trail construction from 2000 to 2015 in the agricultural areas of the unincorporated county. With expiration of the trail construction agreement in 2015, the Commission sought to address agricultural concerns through a trail compatibility survey. The survey includes case studies and lessons learned from other trail projects located within open space and commercial agricultural areas, and includes recommendations for trail and buffer design and trail management policies and strategies to balance the needs of all stakeholders. Strategies include indemnification of farmers. My notes keep closing. Strategies include indemnification of farmers against liability from trail use beyond the existing California statutes that provide such protections, appropriate fencing to delineate trail and agricultural areas, policies and agreements that allow trail closure as needed for agricultural operations such as spraying, controlled crossings for farm equipment, and maintenance and operations policies and practices to maintain the trail and address concerns, to name a few. There are a host of solution strategies that are developed in the trail survey, and all of those are being considered. So recent engagement with agricultural stakeholders has helped us to better understand how the findings from the 2015 compatibility survey apply now in 2025, and what new considerations have arisen. Feedback is being incorporated into the master plan and the draft EIR technical studies and mitigation options. We're continuing to engage with agricultural stakeholders throughout the process. The following topics have been raised during discussion with agricultural stakeholders. Alignments. Farmers have identified a few locations where various trail alternative routes may not be feasible, and that's being incorporated into the trail alternatives. Operational and economic viability. Many growers are concerned that trail proximity could add to existing regulatory and operational burdens, potentially affecting the long-term feasibility of their farms. Existing regulations also create barriers to opportunities for agricultural tourism. Pesticide use, food safety, and liability. Farmers emphasize the challenges of managing spray schedules, buffer zones, and food safety requirements while ensuring protection from liability if trail users enter or impact their properties. Food safety regulations have also changed since 2015. Spraying schedules vary, so closing the trail for spraying operations could be logistically challenging. Fencing, trespass, and safety. Property owners underscored the importance of secure, tall fencing, effective trail management, and clear delineation between agricultural operations and public access to prevent contamination or theft. Fencing design must also allow for escape routes to mitigate safety risks and wildlife management. Emergency access and maintenance. Questions remain regarding how emergency response, trail closures, and maintenance responsibilities will be coordinated. Active trail management is important. Trail amenities and education. Locations of bathrooms need to comply with agricultural regulations and offsets for crops, especially leafy greens. Education campaigns like AgRespect from Napa County Vine Trail would be helpful, but they need to be paired with various other mitigation strategies. Communication and trust. Stakeholders express the need for ongoing two-way communication to ensure that feedback leads to tangible project adjustments and not just acknowledgement. We also heard from agricultural stakeholders, including the Ag Commissioner's Office, that maintaining flexibility for future ag operations is critical, ensuring that the trail and its management practices consider the changing nature of crops and ag practices over time. Just because an orchard is citrus or avocados now does not mean that it won't be row crops or perhaps even coffee in the future. Our team is working to incorporate this feedback and any additional issues that arise through our engagement efforts into the master plan and EIR to develop strategies, design principles, management and maintenance strategies, and other ways to address these concerns. So one of the models for agricultural compatibility that we are exploring is called AgRespect, which is a series of principles and an educational program that was created to address trespass and other property concerns along the Napa Vine Trail in the Napa Valley. The program is available for licensing and use around California and could be applied or adapted to the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail. We did help to facilitate a presentation from the Napa Vine Trail Coalition founder and chairman to the county's Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee in December. We do recognize that there are differences between the types of agricultural practices and the trail projects themselves between Napa and Ventura counties, but we think that the examples are still helpful in developing our own strategies. So based on a review of the original trail master plan, existing conditions, opportunities and constraints analysis, and stakeholder feedback, the team has developed a set of 4 alignments for further evaluation. Alignments were developed through an iterative process with routes initially proposed by the technical team and refined through stakeholder feedback. The primary project corridor is the Santa Paula branch line right-of-way. However, variations are being considered based on community suggestions and where constraints make utilizing the railroad right-of-way difficult. The team is currently considering 4 alternatives. The first 3 alternatives follow the Santa Paula branch line right-of-way with some variations. Alternative 4 follows local roadways and connections to the towns. All are being considered for some level of trail amenities. That 4th alternative, I'll point out, was suggested by one of the agricultural stakeholders at the 2nd community meeting. The next step in alternatives development will be to finalize the evaluation criteria and analysis methodology with the assistance of the project development team to prepare cost estimates for each alternative. Evaluate the opportunity or the alternatives based on project objectives and the evaluation criteria, then select the preferred alignment and range of alternatives for further analysis in the environmental impact report, followed up by identifying funding strategies and developing an implementation plan and schedule. The team is also developing trail amenities concepts, such as rest areas. Rest areas are intended to provide a more comprehensive set of services for trail users. Pedestrian amenity areas are intended to be a brief resting spot for trail users rather than provide a full suite of services. Rest and pedestrian amenity areas are not a distinguishing feature of any one alternative and will be incorporated into whichever alignment is selected. So we are currently in the early stages of the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, process. A programmatic environmental impact report evaluates the potential environmental impacts of a plan, program, or series of actions that can be characterized as one large project. It informs decision makers about the environmental impacts of an entire plan rather than one smaller project within a plan. Contrary to what has been noted in some stakeholder comment letters, the project does not rely on the previous EIR. We are preparing a new environmental impact report with an updated baseline. A programmatic EIR can help to accelerate environmental review of later activities by offering lead agencies flexibility to consider alternatives and mitigation measures, and to streamline approval of future projects and support implementation of capital improvements while considering broad policy alternatives and mitigation earlier when there is more flexibility to address them in a plan. This approach is similar to using a programmatic environmental impact report for this the approach to using a programmatic environmental impact report for this project is similar to the approach that a city would use to prepare a specific plan for a downtown area, as an example. When a city has a specific plan, it includes goals and policies from the general plan with development standards for projects within a defined area, so that when a developer brings forward a proposal for a project, it helps to streamline the review by the city to decide whether or not the project conforms to the approved specific plan. For this programmatic EIR, when segments of the trail are brought forward for further design and construction approval, they will be evaluated to confirm whether the project conforms to the programmatic EIR or whether additional environmental review is necessary. The project this particular project crosses through 4 separate jurisdictions, and a programmatic EIR will provide a consistent policy approach to better prepare agencies to process each project segment during the implementation phase. So the environmental analysis process begins with a project description and public scoping, technical studies, preparation of a draft EIR, public review and hearings, and a final EIR. We are currently finishing up the public scoping phase. So this is a little more detailed roadmap of the EIR process. We've just completed the notice of preparation, and the team is beginning to conduct technical studies and draft the EIR. There will then be a notice of completion and notice of availability to start a minimum 45-day draft environmental impact report public review period. There will then be a final environmental impact report that's prepared with responses to public comments, followed by a certification and decision on the project with findings by this commission, and then finally a notice of determination. So the contents of an EIR are shown here on the slide, along with an example of another segment of what the trail might look like. It does include all of the project description, environmental setting, impact analysis, significance thresholds and effects, mitigation measures, the alternatives considered, cumulative impacts, significant irreversible changes, growth-inducing impacts, effects found not to be significant, and the organizations and persons who are consulted during the development of the EIR. A wide range of factors are analyzed in an environmental impact report, including agricultural, biological and cultural resources, transportation, and wildlife, among others. We will be considering all of the CEQA factors in the environmental impact report. We are not eliminating any for further evaluation, or from further evaluation, rather. So some of the initial feedback that we received on environmental factors from the project development team, the technical advisory committee, and the community advisory committee leading into the third community workshop included agriculture, aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, hydrology and water quality, population and land use, recreation and transportation, and wildfire. All of these and more will be considered in the environmental impact report. We did issue a notice of preparation on November 17th, 2025. It was posted to the project website, submitted to the CEQA clearinghouse, and sent by certified mail to agencies and tribal governments meeting all of their requirements for a notice of preparation. We also hosted a scoping workshop in conjunction with community workshop number 3 on December 11th. Comments were due on December 21st and were submitted by email. And the analysis of all the comments received is currently underway by our consultant team. So public feedback helps to inform the environmental impact report process by helping to focus areas for further analysis and potential impacts in a local context. And it helps to consider a whole range of project alternatives and suggest more effective mitigation measures. So the master plan update and environmental review provides many opportunities to engage in the planning process. The team prepared an outreach and engagement plan that incorporates best practices for public and stakeholder engagement. The 2 advisory committees were formed, including a technical advisory committee and a citizens advisory committee, and a project development team that is made up of agency staff from all of the 4 corridor jurisdictions, as well as the county, Caltrans, Sierra Northern, and others. To date, the technical and citizen advisory committees have each met 3 times, and the PDT has met 7 or I think 8 times by now. We held 4 pop-up events at community events in Santa Paula, Fillmore, Piru, and Satakoy, and we held 3 community workshops in June, October, and December of 2025, with over 100 attendees and 40 responses on roll plot map engagement activities received during just the first 2 workshops. Presentations were available in Spanish, and interpretation was available during the workshops in Spanish, Mixteco, and other indigenous languages. A project website was developed and is available online at our project website. And an online pin map engagement site is available, and I'll include a QR code here later in the presentation. And these are used to collect map-based comments. The pin map site includes a brief introductory video and in both English and Spanish, and the site can be reviewed in 16 languages. To help get the word out about the project and community input opportunities, the team mailed over 1,000 postcards to neighboring property owners, lessees, and interested parties, placed 7 newspaper ads in the Santa Paula Times, Fillmore Gazette, and the Ventura County Star, posted 6 boosted social media ads, placed 5 radio ads on 4 stations in English, Spanish, and Mixteco, posted at least 9 posts in Facebook community groups, and created 3 outreach and engagement toolkits with information on the project and upcoming engagement opportunities. These were each provided to our project development team, the Citizen Advisory Committee, and the Technical Advisory Committee to share with their respective networks. We also reached out directly to farm worker housing advocates and complexes, and we shared all of this information with our TAC, our CAC, and our PDT members, again, to share with their respective networks. We continue to expand the project reach through noticing and other tools. We recently received the contact information on pesticide use permit holders within the branch line corridor from the Agricultural Commissioner's Office. This list includes around 700 individual listings. However, after reviewing the list for duplicates and those individuals or entities who were already on the mailing list that was used for the December community workshop, we have identified 147 new individuals or entities operating within the corridor. We have added these names to our mailing list that will be used for upcoming communications with stakeholders for the draft EIR. We're also planning for an agricultural stakeholders-focused workshop to be held in February or March, as suggested by APAC and other ag-related participants. So I've personally given 5 presentations to community groups, including the Ventura County Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee, One Step Alavez, East Ventura Community Council, and the Fillmore Planning Commission. I'm certainly happy to come to any other groups that you may have who are interested in learning more about the project. And additional one-on-one meetings are also in the works. So far, we've held 18 one-on-one meetings. That included an extensive tour, Highline tour of the railroad corridor with Sierra Northern. We've met with Caltrans, Assemblymember Bennett's office, the Agricultural Commissioner's office, the Farm Bureau, Ventura County, CoLab, Newhall Ranch, the Vine Trail Group, cycling stakeholders, Limonera, Prancer's Farm, Underwood Family Farms, Brokaw Nursery, and our own transit department. We've covered a whole wide range of topics in these meetings, and we will continue to hold these meetings throughout the master plan and EIR process. We do have many opportunities coming up for additional engagement in 2026. We'll continue to hold our technical and citizens advisory committee meetings, and also continue to hold one-on-one and small group engagement sessions. We are scoped to have 6 additional pop-up events as we go into the EIR release process. And we will be releasing the draft EIR this summer for public hearing, for public comment rather, and a final EIR and master plan public hearing later this fall. So there are many alternatives, or many ways to explore the alternatives and to share comments on the project through our online pin map. Comments can be submitted online through spbl.trail@goventura.org. And if you visit the link tree here on the page through the QR code, you can sign up to be notified about future engagement opportunities. So our timeline, we began the existing conditions analysis in May of last year. The commission awarded the contract in March, and then we began existing conditions review in May. That continued throughout the spring and summer. Over the course of the summer and into the fall, the team undertook the conceptual planning efforts, developing the constraints and opportunities analysis, and beginning to formulate the alternatives. The master plan draft is still currently being drafted, and that process began in September. The project definition also began in September and continued throughout the fall. The technical studies began in December and will continue throughout the spring, followed by the draft EIR preparation and final environmental impact report this summer and into the fall. So we do expect to bring the environmental impact report for commission consideration likely in November or December. So with all of that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. And also, as I'm sure you know, for item 14, we have the Ag Commissioner, Commissioner Bell, here with us today to give their perspective on the ag aspects of this project as well. So again, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Before we go to questions, I understand we do have some public comments on this, and the people that submitted the public comments in writing are in the audience. Would you like to come up and make your public comment in public? All right.
My letter outlines all of our concerns in a lot of detail, but happy to answer any questions.
This is
So the speaker in the audience is Maureen McGuire. It just jumped out of my head. Maureen McGuire, who's the executive director of the Farm Bureau. So we did receive, the commissioner should have received letters from the Farm Bureau and from CoLab. I believe they were provided to you here today in writing, and I think many of you received them by email yesterday as well. Those letters are also were submitted in advance of the notice of preparation deadline and are included in the notice of preparation for the environmental impact report. So they're being considered and incorporated through that EIR process as well, but they are here with us in the audience.
okay. Thank you. Does any commissioners have any questions, comments? Yes. Go ahead.
I have some questions as this is in my district, but I wanted to offer it up to anyone else first if you had any questions.
Yeah, I just was,
Go ahead.
mine?
Yes.
Thank you. I was just wondering, after having all the public meetings and whatnot, reaching out to the community, if where the ag community stands now. Can you say?
We have continued to hear concerns from the ag community on potential impacts to adjacent property owners. And the team is evaluating the concerns. They'll be starting the technical studies to try to better understand what the magnitude of the impacts could be, and then develop mitigation measures, whether that's physical design measures or management strategies that could address those concerns. As you'll, I'm sure, see in the letters, the ag communities, there are representatives of the ag community who do continue to have concerns about the project. I will also say that we have heard support from other folks within the ag community, maybe not the most vocal support, but interest in the project and a willingness to work through challenges and to continue to consider the potential for this trail. So I'll just leave it at that.
Over here.
Well, Mr. Chair. There we go. Mr. Chair, we've received extensive letters from both the Ventura County Farm Bureau and Ventura County CoLab. I was kind of hoping that their representatives would be present today to offer comments so I could ask some questions of them regarding their correspondence. If they're willing to do so, I certainly have some questions.
Would you like us to come up together? I'm happy to.
No, each, one at a time would be great,
That'd be fine.
but only if you wish to address the commission, because I do have I do have some questions.
May I?
Sure, come on up.
Hi, I'm Maureen McGuire with the Farm Bureau of Ventura County, and I've submitted a pretty extensive comment letter that, as Amanda has said, was also submitted as a response to the notice of the EIR scoping being completed. So this is a result, and all of the comments I shared in that letter are the result of over 20 years of advocacy opposing the expansion of the trail. Thank you. And so a lot of the issues that were brought up over the last 20 years have only been exacerbated, especially related to pest control and public safety, and then also food safety regulations. I also documented that we're expecting about 1,500 acres of agricultural land to be removed from production if you move forward with this project. There's a lot of frustration in the process because what we consider direct outreach seems to be very different than what VCTC considers direct outreach. And I think it comes from a misunderstanding of how agricultural land and operations work. So if you have a piece of property that is owned in a trust by 20 cousins, that's managed by a lawyer in Illinois, a social media post is not direct outreach in the view of Farm Bureau. And then you have operators who are very vulnerable in the situation. They could lose their leases if they cause too much of a stir. And so we have a really, really tricky situation on how to both engage in the public process and then also, continue to reiterate all of the concerns. So a lot of the advocacy has been through Farm Bureau and through CoLab, because I think we would all agree people shouldn't have to put their livelihoods on the line to be a part of this process. So my attempt in this very extensive letter, I think it's like 11 pages, is to document and highlight a lot of those issues that have been a part of the process and then continue to grow in the concerns as more and more restrictions are placed on farmers. I'm happy to dive into any of these comments. They're all in bold also, so if you didn't have time to read it, I think the main highlights are captured in the section headings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. McGuire. I appreciate it very much. I've extensively reviewed your letter. I've extensively reviewed CoLab's letter, and I'll ask them a couple of questions if they're willing in a couple minutes. So first of all, thank you for your letter. I'm trying to make sure that I understand the Farm Bureau's specific position. So hopefully you're going to help clarify this for me. Step back for a minute. Assume for the sake of discussion that in the opinion of the Farm Bureau, the CEQA documentation were adequate. Set that aside for a minute, but make that assumption. Is it the Farm Bureau's position that the Farm Bureau will always oppose the project, notwithstanding the CEQA documentation?
The Farm Bureau's position is that public trails through commercial agriculture are fundamentally incompatible beyond the procedural elements of the CEQA process.
And I think that's consistent. It sounds to me like that's consistent with paragraph 3 of page 1 of your letter, which I'll paraphrase, which is that the Farm Bureau unequivocally opposes any expansion of the SBBL trail through or adjacent to active commercial agricultural land. And am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So it wouldn't matter what CEQA documentation would be done. Farm Bureau doesn't matter the procedural side of it and what CEQA work would be done. It's the Farm Bureau's articulated position through this letter that it will always oppose this type of project.
With the
am I understanding it correct? No, I'm not trying to be hostile anyway. I just trying to make sure I understand the Farm Bureau's position.
So the Farm Bureau's position is based on the operational realities of agriculture. So there would need to be fundamentally new information brought forward on how those concerns would be mitigated before we would reconsider our position.
Well, let me try it this way. So there there are no circumstances under the way the facts are from an existing standpoint, there are no circumstances upon which the Farm Bureau would not oppose the project.
If there was a repeal of the FSMA law, if there was a change in the law around liability for drift incidents for pesticides, I can think of lots of different ways that those things could happen. Whether that's within the scope of what VCTC can do is another question. So I wouldn't say that there's a fundamental Farm Bureau will never change. I think we've been trying to listen and be collaborative partners, and we haven't been able to hear what those mitigations could be as part of this process. So I'm not a CEQA expert, but I would say we are always open to reconsidering our positions if fundamental facts in the situation change.
But then help me understand the third paragraph of page 1 of your letter, which articulates that the Farm Bureau is unequivocally exposed to any expansion of the SPBL trail. I'm putting you.
I didn't enumerate things like
I'm putting you on the spot because I just want to make sure I understand the Farm Bureau's position.
So as the facts are now, in the reality we live in right now with the information I have, we are opposed to this project, and that's been consistent since 1999, and that's the intention of what I'm trying to communicate in that sentence.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You got it. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Next will be a representative from CoLab.
Louise Lampera, Ventura County CoLab, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Louise, and thanks for being here today, and thanks for your letter, and it's extensive, and I've written it, and it focuses principally on the CEQA process, but I want to ask you the same letters because I did not see the same type of unequivocal language in CoLab's letter that I saw in the Farm Bureau's letter.
And actually, I'm very glad that you asked me that question. And if you hadn't, I was actually going to ask you to please ask me that question.
Yeah, we didn't practice this ahead of time. Right.
So when I initially became involved in this project, approximately 2+ years ago, that's a rough estimate, I actually saw a possibility that this could be, if done properly, if agriculture could be protected, that this could actually be something that could coincide along agriculture. However, over the last 2 years, I have had meetings with VCTC staff. We've had discussions about the type and extent of outreach that would be described as full engagement, the type of issues that would have to be addressed, and unfortunately, I don't see this process moving in that direction. And furthermore, there have been changes since the last time this project came before this commission that were not spoken to in detail in staff's presentation. The Ag Commissioner, I believe, will speak more in detail to these, but there significantly is an issue that was on nobody's radar years ago, not even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and that is the HLB quarantine. The HLB quarantine, I'll let the Ag Commissioner talk a little bit more because I don't know bugs and quarantine. It is a disease for which there is no cure that destroyed the Florida citrus industry. Florida citrus used to be one of the biggest agricultural industries in the United States. Everyone here probably remembers the commercials of, Florida orange juice, right? You don't see those anymore. And the reason is that 90+% of the Florida citrus industry has been destroyed by this disease. Recently, this disease appeared in Ventura County in the alignment of the trail. Active measures are being taken under USDA and CDFA to try to keep this disease contained so that it does not destroy the California citrus industry. With this change, and this is just one of other changes that have happened with the agricultural industry recently, and again, I'm going to defer to the Ag Commissioner for some of those, that creates an entirely different situation. I want to kind of present this or give you all a slightly different mindset to consider with this, okay? In the compatibility study, even in the Napa Valley, which in my letter I incorrectly think Sonoma, sorry about that, those trails do not bifurcate through agricultural land where there is currently no public access. That makes this project very different than enhancing a bike trail that runs along a road, that runs along another public access area. This, comparing different areas and what they've built with this, is not comparing lemons to lemons, if you'll let me make the joke. So we need to think about this differently. There is no public access through this ag land today. Agriculture is beautiful. It's why I work doing the job that I do, to protect it. But agriculture is not a view shed. It is not just an attractive landscape. At its heart, commercial agriculture is an industrial factory. Introducing public access into private agricultural land where there is no public access today is the equivalent of building a public sidewalk through the Procter & Gamble plant in Oxnard. So imagine the safety concerns, both for those working in the plant and the general public, to do something like that. The EIR has to address that on both sides. And I have come in my analysis, especially with these new issues, the quarantine being one, changes and increased requirements in federal food safety, state food safety, and even vendor food safety regulations and laws, that the EIR, if properly done, if the studies are properly done and the analysis is thorough, what will be brought to your commission is a need to take a stand on several statements of overriding consideration, because there are issues that have developed since the last time this was considered by this commission that cannot be mitigated. And I firmly believe that. And I have seen enough CEQA, as you can probably tell from my letter, that I don't believe I'm exaggerating. I would like to see what the EIR proposes. But how do you mitigate stopping the spread of a disease with no cure? How do you mitigate pesticide reentry zone restrictions and timelines? How do you mitigate a farmer going out of business because he's lost his food safety license, because now public transverses through what was non-public ag land before? So my opinion about the feasibility of this project has changed. And I did come into it thinking that there was a possibility.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, no, and Louise, thank you for your thoughtful comments. Just as a note of personal privilege, as the descendant of a Petaluma dairy ranching family, I am rearing a 49ers matter, which Mr. Levere and I have chatted about prior to this meeting because he's an Eagles fan. I appreciate the distinction between Sonoma versus Napa County.
And I apologize. I clearly I have a wine preference.
I'm just teasing.
And it showed up in my comments.
Well, we have to, that would be a subject of another conversation another time.
I am willing to be dissuaded.
So to make sure that and thank you for helping clarify for me what CoLab's position is, and I think I understand it at this point, because when I read the letter suggested to me that the CEQA process itself, or the CEQA document, was not adequate for what was intended to be put forward.
Well, we do not agree with the programmatic approach.
That's fine. I was just taking it in a more macro way, right? And I understand you don't agree with the program level EIR concept on this. But let me ask you the same question then that I asked Ms. McGuire. Assume for sake of discussion that an EIR document was prepared that CoLab considered to be adequate for purposes of this, we'll call it project or program, however you want to, whichever term you want to use. What I'm hearing you say is that CoLab would like to see what the EIR proposes because of these circumstances, additional circumstances that have occurred in the last couple of years. The quarantine issue, the food safety issue, et cetera. But with that being said, is it CoLab's position, is CoLab in alignment with the Farm Bureau by saying that CoLab would unequivocally oppose this project even if the CEQA documentation, even if it deemed the CEQA documentation to be adequate?
Well, just to be clear, it is CoLab's position currently, with what we understand would be possible, enforceable, specific mitigation measures that VCTC could propose that we feel meet CEQA requirements as the definition of mitigation, that there is no way to mitigate for some of the impacts to agriculture. So when I could be wrong, but in our opinion, we believe that some of these impacts are not mitigatable, which means then, in our opinion, a thorough, complete, and technically aligned EIR would show that to this commission, at which point it will have to be the decision of this commission whether or not you approve a statement of overriding considerations, whether the benefit of the project in this commission's mind outweighs the unmitigatable significant impact to agriculture. And that's a different argument.
Right. Certainly, I understand that. Just one more question then, but from a predeterminative standpoint, it appears to me to be CoLab's position that notwithstanding anything that is done relative to the CEQA documentation, the commission would find itself at some point in the future having to look at whether or not to adopt a statement of overriding considerations. Am I correct?
CoLab does not predetermine. We base our decisions and our policy positions on data, facts, and the law.
But certainly you believe that at this point, based on what you have articulated in terms of issues, that the conclusion of the EIR, at the conclusion of the EIR process, the commission would be faced with whether or not to adopt a statement of overriding considerations, assuming that the mitigation measures
I do want to
available.
push back a little bit, Commissioner Tremblay.
No, that's why I want to have the dialogue. Thank
Because you are, right now, the only person who has stood up here and presented an analysis, shall we say, right, is me. Until VCTC presents their analysis, that's an unfair question.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to briefly thank you both, Farm Bureau and Collab, for being here. I wanted to ask, so I feel like I've been here way too long, 10 years, and we've addressed this, and many of those that are on this commission have not heard this until maybe this is the first time. And so Collab, when we had this study, I think there was one in 2012. It's been stated by Farm Bureau that since 1999, they have been against this. Has Collab also been against this in this time frame?
And some of this was before I was the executive director.
Correct.
In the past, yes. Collab opposed the portion of the project that was the segment between Fillmore and Piru.
Right.
It's my understanding. And at that point, it was because, and again, I'm going off of memory and reading somebody else's notes, right, in our files. It was because the trespass and security issues could not be addressed because what was necessary in terms of fencing to protect agricultural land from trespass and crime and the like would have created an unsafe situation in the eyes of the sheriff's department for people on the bike trail.
Thank you.
And that couldn't be resolved.
Thank you, because that's something I think that everyone needs to understand. There's a difference between a bike lane in a city and a bike lane in ag land. And so I would like to make sure that I would ask VCTC to provide the studies that were in the past. I think not summarizing it just to this future one is not effective enough to get the true feel of what this community has been going through with the discussions for the last 20 plus years. So I would like to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Go ahead.
To the chair, I would just like to make a comment for the record for purposes of CEQA. The CEQA impacts, every impact of a project is not necessarily an impact for purposes of CEQA under the CEQA law. And so as part of the evaluation and scoping process for the draft EIR, these issues will be evaluated and determined which ones are appropriate to be included and which have CEQA mitigation measures. I don't believe that every impact that's raised in these comment letters constitutes an impact under CEQA pursuant to the law.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question then, just so that everyone understands? What's the difference between a programmatic EIR and a project EIR?
Yeah.
So that everyone understands that.
Certainly.
Whoever.
So
I
I
was
can
going to let her answer it since she's our lawyer.
So a programmatic EIR is a tool under CEQA that is specifically contemplated for projects like this, large-scale projects that are often implemented over time. The advantages of a program EIR is that if you're doing a project that is of this size and scale, that's going to be implemented in pieces, you have situations where if you did project-specific impacts, the project-specific EIRs only, that you might miss cumulative impacts of the entire project. You might also have situations where you're duplicating analysis over and over. So a program EIR is designed for a project like this. A program EIR is not, it often does technical analysis for site-specific areas as part of it, but a programmatic EIR is not a replacement for project-specific EIRs. Every segment of this trail, when it is being proposed for implementation and approval, will require an environmental, an environmental review, and it will have to be determined whether or not that project, those project impacts are consistent with the programmatic EIR, whether additional technical studies or additional mitigation would have to be implemented as part of that specific segment.
Thank you. That's a great education for us. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And I'd also like to add that though we are preparing a programmatic EIR, the project will include site-specific analysis as part of the technical studies and the EIR. So the way that our consultant explains it, it's you're sort of getting the best of both worlds, where you have the program level impacts analysis, that cumulative impact analysis, but we're also going to be looking at site-specific impacts as well as part of that process. So it will be a robust EIR prepared for your consideration.
Commissioner Crosswhite?
I know we're going to continue to have lots of conversation about this, so I'm just going to ask a specific question based on the couple of members of the public that were speaking. There was a comment made, I think, by the person from CoLab, but it could apply to either of you, that the type of engagement that you requested you felt you didn't get. Could you clarify what kind of engagement you're referring to?
Well, actually, it kind of just happened just now. In my conversations, when I first, was getting involved in this project a few years ago, we were getting assurances from staff that, no, we don't want to harm agriculture. We are going to address all impacts to agriculture. We are going to make sure that this project does not harm agriculture. But now, Council just pointed out, the concerns of farmers won't even be analyzed, and not all of them will even be analyzed in the EIR. So when will they be? Engagement and outreach is more than just sending out meeting notices. It's more than just having a conversation or asking people, okay, tell me your comments. It's what the commission does with them. And it's my understanding that part of the reason that the commission is seeking to see if this is a viable project is because of the ability, or because people want to bike through a beautiful area. If you do not address all the concerns and all the impacts, whether council decides they fall under CEQA or not, you will not have agriculture along that bike trail because of state and federal regulations and the quarantine. So it's more than just what does this commission need to address under CEQA. Real engagement, in CoLab's opinion, I'm not going to speak for Farm Bureau, is what is the commission going to do about all the concerns from the farmers, whether they meet the CEQA definition for analysis or not. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Thank you.
To the chair, I can make a clarifying statement.
Sure.
So this project, when it's brought forward to you, will have two approvals, approval of the master plan and approval of the EIR. Whether or not something is a CEQA impact or not doesn't mean that that impact cannot be considered as an operational and policy consideration as approval of the master plan update.
Thank you.
And then just one more question.
Go ahead.
As we go through this process, will we, or have we, or the people who are going to be drawing up the plans or doing the evaluation, done any site visits? Because I know that when we have a project, sometimes it'll look one way when you're sitting there at the dais or studying at home, and then you go and you look at it and you go, oh, okay, that's not exactly what I pictured or imagined. And so I didn't know if we had done any sort of going out and looking and talking with some of the potentially impacted property owners, or planned to, or what the plan was there.
So the team has been out to conduct 2 full-day rail tours of the line, and so we looked at the full corridor, the full project area, and spent 2 full days out there. The team has also made a number of other site visits that I was not a party to, out to the site. We have had a number of virtual meetings with agricultural stakeholders, including the Farm Bureau and CoLab, as well as a number of major growers along the line, folks who have expressed an interest in the project. We've met with folks at the community workshops, and we're certainly open to doing additional, in-person site visits with growers. We haven't said no to any meetings that have been requested of us, and I think we have made ourselves available for those conversations. I'll also say that we are balancing a grant and a budget that was approved with a specific scope of work that the commission approved. So we're managing those expectations, those requirements of our grant and the scope of work that the commission approved, that included the outreach and engagement plan. So we're balancing that with the demands and realities of this project. On top of all of our other workload. So as I'm sure you all know, we have a lot on our plates. We have a teeny tiny little staff. So we are doing our best to be engaged with the community on this project. And yes, you're hearing some of the disappointed voices in the room that don't feel like we've done enough, but I think we have really tried our best to get out there and hear from folks. And I think you would hear differently from other constituents. We are trying to balance all of the stakeholders in this region who are interested in having those active transportation connections between the cities, from young people who want to safely be able to ride from one end of the city to the other, to connect to adjacent cities, to connect to transit and education and others. We're hearing from not just the bicycle advocates, but sort of, regular people who are interested in having these active transportation connections. So while I appreciate and understand the concerns of the ag community, we are trying to balance everything that we have before us. We're also still on the front end of this process. We have to figure out where those lines are on the map before we can analyze the impacts of those alternatives. And so we've developed the lines on the map based on all of the input that we've received so far. And then now the team can start to actually evaluate what those impacts really are, to do the math, to say how many acres, to say how we can address those concerns. Maybe it's reform of seeking reform of liability rules. Maybe it's looking at conservation easements and protections for farmland, in other areas of the county. There's a whole variety, and that's not even to start with all of the educational. The public educational campaign that would come along with this project. And I firmly believe, as we've gone through this process, that if VCTC is going to approve going forward with implementing this plan, and as we develop, individual segments, that we have a robust management and maintenance structure and a team who could take that on. And I know that that's not my team. We're not currently equipped to really do this the way it needs to be done. So there's a lot more to come. While it feels like we've been at this forever, I want to assure you that we are still on the front end of this planning process, and then the implementation that would come after.
Thank you.
Really?
Really. I just want to thank the teeny tiny staff for all the work that you've been doing, as well as the project development team. It's been going on for a long time, and I appreciate all the work that you have done to keep this on the forefront burner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Long?
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate the evaluation of this and I want to ask some questions of curiosity. We have studied this multiple times, and so I was not understanding why we only presented one route initially in the stakeholder engagement, because I know that there are options. And when you said that there was the fourth alternative was just brought up, I was concerned because I know in the past, people have asked for different routes that were not in agriculture land that was on both sides. I know you and I have talked about, well, there's bike lanes on Telegraph, and therefore you can just do it through ag land. There's a lot of different assumptions there that may be true or not. So I wanted to understand with this stakeholder engagement, since the first one, were all of these alternates provided to people?
So as part of the master planning process, and as part of the scope of work development way back when we applied for the grants, and actually even going back even further, the original trail master plan that the commission adopted in 2000 includes a route. So we started with that original route as the primary route for consideration as we're updating this master plan. We're also focused on, there are some deviations from the Santa Paula Branch Line Railroad right-of-way in that original master plan. So we started with the original lines on the map and worked from that to try to look at whether there are currently options to make the project more cost-effective, to better serve the community, to take advantage of existing crossings of the 126, so that we're not adding additional at-grade crossings or other impacts to traffic on the 126. And one of the other constraints that the team has been looking at is the tunnel through Todd Road. So the technical team presented to VCTC staff and to the public a number of possible alternatives that would, for example, avoid the tunnel. Those lines on the map went to the first community workshop for feedback. They were refined at the second workshop based on feedback that we heard during the first workshop and all of the other engagement that was taking place. So at those workshops, we have the giant roll plot map and a bunch of markers and sticky notes, and folks have the opportunity to say, that's actually my property. I'm not interested in having you ride on my I'm not going to give you the easement to that private road that you would need to draw this line on the map. And so we said, okay, great, we'll take that off the map. So the third set of lines that were presented at the third community workshop were again a refinement based on the third, what we heard during the intervening months. So now what the team has done is they've taken all that feedback and they have developed a set of 4 alternatives for further consideration in the EIR process. One of those alternatives is a deviation from the branch line to say, and this was brought to us by agricultural stakeholders, both at a community meeting and in a letter. And that particular alternative, we refer to it here as 4. It does utilize Old Telegraph Road for the Ventura to Santa Paula segment. It returns to the branch line for a bit of time because there aren't really other alternatives there. And then it also goes south of the road, or south of the river onto
Old Mountain.
Onto other existing public roads. And so we looked at that alternative and said, you know what, this is a community presented alternative that while it's not focused on the branch line itself, it meets the definition of what folks have been asking for, and that's an alternative to the branch line. So you're still providing an active transportation route from Ventura to Piru, but you're not using the branch line. And so we said, we think that that's a worthy alternative to be considered for further consideration as part of the EIR process. So that's where it stands. It is an alternative. We're still refining those alternatives based on the public feedback, and the technical analysis will, present a new set of alternatives for the commission to select from, and to be that preferred alternative that then becomes the basis for the EIR and the master plan adoption.
Well, and I appreciate that, because I want to remind our commission, remember the days with Northern Sierra's contract? And the agriculture coming and the homeowners coming because of issues. And we had a lot of special meetings, and a lot of the agriculture and the helicopters and the pesticides. So I'm trying to understand, based on all of the learning that was done there, shouldn't we have an agriculture advisory committee that's looking at these routes to help you? Because I do not believe that everyone is an expert. And like you said, we have a small and mighty force, and we're just trying to evaluate. And so I'm trying to get you as much help as possible, instead of having situations. If you look at when we hit COVID and everyone heard, oh, there's a trail and the punch bowls. Everyone remember that? We had to shut them down because there was no one to look through it, and it was trashed and horrible. I also have Callegas Creek that was just in the news with their trail that is right by houses, and that there was an incident there, very horrible, a trail I go to all the time, that has public access to it, and you can see it. I have great concerns on what this is doing for the ag and the public safety of our community, especially with public safety, as we know, throughout that corridor. And so I don't take this lightly. And I've been beating the drum on stakeholder engagement on this, because I've been understanding bike enthusiasts that want to bike everywhere, and also the public safety in our industry of ag. And so I ask that we look at that. I know there's a list that we've had, and so I'm really frustrated that we're not hearing that all of those were made because of the issues that we had for the branch line just to get the Northern Sierra in, and those Sunbeam bikes. I'm just trying to understand, we need to be listening to our ag a lot, and if you could address that.
So as I
think
mentioned, we
Supervisor,
have,
but that's something we'll certainly address. Just going back to our strategic plan,
Yeah.
as executive director, I was the one who brought this plan and asked you to approve it, and we did. And stakeholder engagement, you actually asked that component to be placed in here. So I actually see this as part of good stakeholder engagement, is we're getting full feedback, and we want to make sure we hear from everybody and we look at every option. Just to frame this a little bit, this is a 30-mile piece of land with about a 100-foot right-of-way that VCTC owns, that was purchased in 1995. And one of the reasons for purchasing it was to consider a bike trail as part of that. There's an existing bike lane in the city of Santa Paula. There's an existing one in the city of Fillmore. The city of Ventura is about to build one. So clearly these other sections are not, not municipally owned and not simple. But I would respectfully disagree with our friends from the ag community that this has not been a robust outreach, because I've been part of it too. And whether we had 100 people or 5, I've done a lot of outreach things, and I, for whatever shortcomings we had, I feel like it has been effective. Clearly, we have more work to do.
Well, and I say that only because I've had my staff at the meetings, and I've had people calling me and email me, and very unsatisfied that it's going through that area and wanting alternates. I don't think anyone is not wanting bike paths through Ventura County. I think it's the location. And so that's why I was concerned when we just showed the first one. It's like, we're out, here we are again. And so I feel like we haven't been listening as much when we've done the master studies. And so that's why I asked for the alternate. But I do want to ask.
If I could just add on to Martin's answer to your question specifically about whether we would create an agricultural advisory committee for this project. we have gone to the county's Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee now three times, once in 2023, again in November of this year, and then in December, we facilitated the Napa Vine Trail co-founder to come speak to Ag, the APAC as well. So that's one small piece of it. We heard from the Ag representatives early on in the project when we were developing the scope of work that some folks wouldn't feel comfortable speaking in an open public meeting. And so that's why we scoped in 30 one-on-one public meeting or one-on-one meetings with individual stakeholders. So we've done 18, 19 of those so far. We have additional ones forthcoming. I also received earlier this week a proposal from our team to host an ag-focused stakeholders workshop. And so I'm still reviewing the details of that proposal, but I do anticipate that being part of our process going forward to try to have a more directed, focused discussion with ag representatives and ag stakeholders as we go forward. So that's, I want to convey to you that I don't think that's late. We're not late in the game doing that. I mean, perhaps we could have done it earlier, but again, we just awarded the contract in March, and it's sort of building momentum, and you don't, we have tried to bring ag engagement into those technical and advisory committee, the technical advisory committee as well as the citizens advisory committee. And so that hasn't been enough for folks. So we're looking at doing additional engagement there.
And I appreciate that. The next item I have is in January, February, March, April, May of 2024. I received an email from Corinne Bell in our Department of Agriculture that CDF officials were stating that we had the HLB quarantine process was beginning. And I've been to many of those locations where they're talking with community members and knocking on doors and seeing dead trees in Santa Paula. And I have great concern that this is going to spread like Florida. And we have been at director meetings where people are saying that they're switching out from lemons, but they're not going to row crops. So you had made a comment about rotation of crops and so forth.
It was just I was just referring as an example to, what we heard from the Ag Commissioner's office was that agriculture changes over time, and that just because something is one thing now doesn't mean it won't be something else in the future. So just using that as a broad example that one of the things we heard is that whatever we do with the management and the strategies to address compatibility going forward, that we maintain flexibility for whatever type of agriculture comes in the future.
And I understand that, so I wanted to ensure that the commissioners, my understanding is that they're not going to row crops, but to avocados, because everybody loves guacamole. So I'm really concerned of access to these industries, these areas, and I think that needs to be outside. And so I'm concerned, and I'm actually looking at the ordinance that we had for the 15-year from 2000 to 2015. Maybe there's an ordinance we need to put together to not do it in that corridor where, because we're going to be closing out an industry. I'm being told if we're putting private access through private land areas, that they will have to stop their farming, and those properties will then be going to housing or so forth. And I'm very concerned by that because agriculture is one of our biggest industries here, and we have 150 years of history and knowledge of this. So I don't want to not listen to them. And so I'm very, very concerned. And so as we go forward, I just want to make sure that I'm beating this drum so you understand. And I don't like the statement where we're just completing this master plan. I think that means the assumption is that we're building it and it's Route 1. And so I get great concern on that because I'm getting the calls left and right. Maybe your staff isn't, but I'm going to just tell them that now they need to start showing up to these meetings because I'm concerned if they don't get a voice where is it going to happen? Because it just seems like, okay, we listen, and then we just kind of like a roadblock. We just keep running over them. And then someday we're going to have housing all the way through Ventura to Piru, and all those ag land is gone. And so I have great concern on that.
I hear and understand your concerns. I will say, and I tried to go into great detail on what those concerns were that we've heard so far. Even recognizing that we do have, your time is all valuable. I tried to do my best to summarize what we've heard so far in terms of those concerns. We did bring the Ag Commissioner here to speak further to those concerns and answer your questions. So we are doing what we can to listen, and then the next phase will be to develop strategies to address those concerns. Ultimately, it will be up to the commission to decide whether to adopt the trail master plan and to adopt or to accept the environmental impact report. We're simply following the commission's direction to update this trail master plan to facilitate its completion. So that is what we're trying to do here with this process. And if the commission has additional guidance or direction, things that you want us to do, I heard today that you'd like us to do more of a ag working group along the way. We certainly can do that. We'll have to work with our consultant to build that into the scope. And we'll just continue to try to do our best to engage with the ag community and bring the project to you for a decision at the end.
Go ahead.
First of all, Amanda, thank you. Thank you for your work on this. But I read thoroughly through Ms. McGuire's letter. Thank you for being so thorough on that. And I am certainly hearing Ms. Lamparo's passion up here. She's talking and provided some great insight. I feel like we're just so far apart. Frankly, I'm certainly a proponent of the path for all the right reasons. Everyone else is, but ag is such a vital part of our region that I think the outreach that has been done so far clearly doesn't seem adequate. I think that it's one thing to engage, but it's another thing to actually listen. And I don't know if we need to maybe consider adding to the scope for the consultant to address many of these issues that have been brought up both by McGuire and by Lampara, to provide some insight to us so that we can have a clear analysis on what we're doing, because I think we're just seriously very far apart. And we need to, I think we just need to address these issues so that we have a clear understanding of what we're deciding on. And if it's more help that you need, I think that it's on us to look at the scope of work that we have with the consultant and see if we can expand on that to address all the technical questions that they brought up. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. And I'll just add that this is a receive and file item. We've heard a lot of, I think, good comment. And clearly, I think, as the Mayor noted, there's a wide divide here on a lot of issues. I have always said that this trail will only proceed from the existing portions that are done right now if we find ways to mitigate the concerns of the agricultural community. And clearly, there's some work to do still there before that happens. So more to come on this, a receive and file item. Appreciate all the comments and appreciate our friends from the ag community providing their input. As Amanda noted, there's also a lot of input from advocate folks too. And I think all of you have been doing this job long enough to know that you could have a meeting where the room is full of people saying, I want the trail tomorrow. But we're trying to find that balance, and ultimately the decision's up to you whether we go forward on this. But we don't want to do anything that harms the ag community, and that's how we're going to continue to proceed forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Great presentation. And thank you for everybody else that participated. And thanks for all the comments from the commissioners. And thank you for making this the longest meeting of my chairmanship. Moving it on to item number 13, the County of Ventura's Agricultural Commissioner presentation. And this will also be done by Amanda, or presented by Amanda.
So I'm simply here at this point to introduce the Ventura County Agriculture Commissioner, Corinne Bell. And I will, Commissioner Bell is here at the request and suggestion of the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee. She's here to speak on some of their roles and responsibilities related to agriculture here in the county and how that is related to the Santa Paula Branch Line Bike Trail project. So, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Corinne Bell, and I'm the Agricultural Commissioner for Ventura County. I struggled a little bit of how to put a title on this presentation because normally I would be called to answer questions specific to my my position. So for lack of a better title, this is what I came up with. I'd just like to start and kind of give you an overview of what we do. We have 4 main divisions. I know we're a regulatory agency, primarily. Our mission is to protect and promote agriculture while ensuring the safety of the public, the environment, and equity in the marketplace. So our 4 main divisions are pesticide use enforcement, pest exclusion, agriculture and consumer protection, and weights and measures. And I'm going to talk about 2 of our divisions specifically because these are what relate and interface directly with the project at hand. So pesticide use enforcement is one of our largest programs, primarily because we have so much agriculture in Ventura County. We rank number 10 in the state. We have $2.1 billion annually in gross revenue, and that's not counting for the multiplier effect of what we contribute to the economy. Unfortunately, with farming, it involves pesticides, whether we're talking about organic or not. All commercial farming involves some sort of pesticide use. And so it's important in order to ensure that this is done safely, we have a team of folks whose job is to go through each of these steps, and I'll just mention them briefly. We issue permits, but we don't just issue them willy-nilly. People have to come into our office, and depending on what they plan to use, they have to be licensed. Those licenses involve training in all sorts of areas of pesticide safety. If they have to have employees, those employees have to be trained. And if they plan to use California restricted materials, we go through a series of questions of what alternatives have they considered before they're planning to use some of the more toxic materials. So we also do what's called pre-site evaluations, and those are before a pesticide is applied. We go out and to ensure that all of the environmental conditions are adequate in order to safely apply that chemical. And so these aren't done for every single application, but they are done routinely, and they are done for our more toxic materials that are being used. Once that has been approved, there's also notices of intent that are submitted, and that's done through our restricted materials process. So that is when someone plans to apply one of the California restricted materials, they have to submit what's called a notice of intent. We analyze that notice before they're allowed to apply that pesticide. And then if we do application inspections, so we can either use that notice of intent and go directly to that particular application and witness that application, or we do random inspections. So we have a team that drives around looking for applications that are occurring. They're not announced, they're at random, and so people aren't necessarily on their best behavior. So the idea is to catch what's going on in real time. And so we have a series of questions that we ask, checklists that we go through to ensure that all of the laws and regulations are being followed for each application. If we find that there's a problem, this could lead to a headquarters or a storage inspection, but we also do these routinely as well. So we're going and ensuring that pesticides are being stored properly, that they have all the required record keeping to ensure that their employees have been trained, and that they're following all the regulations regarding storage and record keeping. We do a large number of field worker safety inspections, and we actually we're very pleased to have been awarded a position several years ago now, because many of our agricultural workers do not speak Spanish or English. They speak 5 different dialects that are spoken in Ventura County. And so we have basically, I call him a liaison, but he's our farm worker liaison, and he's trilingual, so we're able to communicate to folks in their own language, and we question whether they've been trained in pesticide safety. And so this was a huge tool and advantage for us to ensure that we're actually talking to the employees themselves, not just the foreman or the boss, and we're actually speaking to them in their own language. So that's been a wonderful addition to our department. People think about agricultural pesticide use, but we also monitor all of the structural pesticide use. So anytime your house is tinted or you call someone out for ant spraying or termite, we are the ones inspecting to make sure that those are done safely. We in Ventura County, we are lucky enough to have one of 11 air monitoring stations in the state. And so our staff goes out and we collect these samples to ensure that the emissions are all under the thresholds for safety. And in fact, they've just published a report that's saying that Ventura County is doing really, really well, and all of our air quality has been well under the thresholds of concern. So we're very pleased to have that air monitoring station here, because like I said, there's only 11 in the state. We also do an enforcement response. So if, for example, there is a problem or a violation that occurs, we issue violation notices. We issue fines, and we do compliance assistance inspections. We can go out and do outreach and training. So we do a number of things to keep people in compliance with the multitude of laws and regulations that are required of them. I go into this detail because I want to just lay the groundwork for how complicated this program can be. When we say we do pesticide use enforcement, I want you to actually have a little bit of an understanding of what that actually looks like, and a team of people that do this all day, every day. And it's extensive and it's arduous. I also put half apiary there because I borrowed this slide from another presentation I did, because this group will also report to any kind of incident where bees have reported like a bee death and they suspect pesticide use. The other division I'd like to highlight today is our pest exclusion division, and this is basically the division that helps ensure trade in Ventura County. Ventura County is the #5 exporter in the world. That's a huge feather in our cap for Ventura County, and so we have to have an incredibly robust program to ensure that this is that we keep that trade going. And so what we do, we have a team of people who go out to our packing houses and warehouses where Ventura County local produced food has been sent, and or has been sent from another county, and we've re-inspected it, or another country. And we issue what's called a phytosanitary certification, and that's basically, because we are the #5 exporter in the world, we ensure that our exports are free from all of the pests and diseases that the importing countries do not want. So we happen to also be home to the largest exporter of vegetable seed in the world here in Ventura County. And so we have someone who's pretty much stationed at that facility all day, every day, signing these certificates and doing these inspections. We do what's called high-risk pest exclusion. We're out at FedEx, UPS every morning, and we're opening up packages and ensuring that plant material that's coming in. Grandma sends a lei from Hawaii to her granddaughter graduating from high school. We're inspecting that plant material to make sure that it's free from any of the pests and diseases we don't want. We are also at nurseries, retail establishments that sell nursery material, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, the Green Thumbs. We're there inspecting that plant material to ensure that it's free from the pests and diseases we don't want before it can be issued for sale. And so essentially this program is all about keeping pests out that we don't want and keeping the pests that we have from spreading. And I bring this up because this is very relevant to the Santa Paula branch line and some of the information we've heard from today. This program also has a few other programs. Industrial hemp used to be quite a big thing in 2019. It was the Wild Wild West in Ventura County. We had 3,600 acres of hemp being grown, and now we're down to 11. Yeah, 5 growers, and so it is definitely not as big of a deal as it used to be, but there's we're holding out, hoping that there's potential for growth in any agricultural product for Ventura County. And then it covers a couple other little programs, the sudden oak death program, which is obviously very destructive disease, but we do our inspections to ensure that any sign of that disease is stamped out, and then shipments are stopped if the diseases, the plant material showing signs are destroyed in order to prevent and protect our oaks that we all value so much in this county. We are the #3 nursery county in the state, so we have a huge nursery industry here. And so it's important for us to walk these nurseries every year to ensure that they're clean, free of pests and diseases, make sure they're licensed, et cetera. And then green waste monitoring. This is an area I'd love to see some improvement on and some regulatory teeth, because we are next door to LA, and LA has a lot of landscaping, and a lot of those landscape trucks make it over to Ventura County, and the green waste gets dumped. And unlike mulch, which is composted and has been heated up to levels where pests have been killed, this stuff is just green, and it is a huge pathway for pests in Ventura County. And so that's a big concern, because we have no way of knowing when these trucks are coming in and where they're dumping them. So we do have a program, but it's a kind of a surveillance monitoring program. If we see a truck on the road, we follow it, which you can imagine that might be a little, we don't catch as much as we'd like to that way. And this is the program that also, that half apiary, they inspect our hives for bee health and ensure that our apiaries are free from pests and diseases. So I go into detail on these 2 particular divisions because they have the most to do with the project that we're discussing today, and but I'd like to mention that we do lots of other things. So, but these are the 2 I'd focus on for the purposes of this presentation. So I found this quote from George Washington that says, "Agriculture is the most healthful, most useful, and most noble employment of man." I'm not here, as much as I agree with this opinion, I'm not here today to give you an opinion. I'm here today to provide you some of the facts. And some of the facts as it pertains to this project is that, farms are food factories. Someone used that imagery to me one time, and I thought that is absolutely perfect, and I am going to use that the next time I have an opportunity. It's absolutely the case. I know I won't belabor the point because I know Louise she stole my thunder and used my imagery, but she mentioned the Procter & Gamble plant. Farms, just like factories that we're most commonly associate with in our minds, they have noise, they have heavy equipment, they have dust, they have chemical use, and that all happens on farms. And just like we don't have public access, free, unimpeded public access through our factories, we also don't, there is also the same concerns as to why we wouldn't have free and unimpeded access through our factories applies to agriculture. There is another item brought up that agriculture changes. That is a fact. I have had people call me up and say, I don't like the row crops. I want the orange trees. Make them put the orange trees back. And I have to tell them, I can't make them put the orange trees back. People move to Ventura County because they love our views, right? They love our agriculture, they love our way of life, and I can't agree more. But agriculture changes, and we have to allow that to happen so that agriculture can continue to be viable. And so, you know, when, you know, for decades, citrus was the #1 crop in our county, for decades. And then in 2000, around 2000, strawberries overtook lemons and have been the #1 crop by far for ever since. And so agriculture changes. And so when we plan for things and projects, we have to anticipate that just because it's this today doesn't mean it's going to be this tomorrow. And I bring that up because there are different forms of intensity in agriculture. So tree crop farming, before the Asian citrus psyllid and the Wanglong Bing, many tree crops never had to be sprayed, never. And now, because of quarantine requirements, which I'll go into, it has to be sprayed now. And so agriculture that never had chemical use before now requires it. Row crops, such as, you know, our vegetables and our fruits, our berries and such, those are more intensive forms of agriculture. You have a lot more going on. Harvest is more often. You have more people in there. You have different materials. You have hoops. You have plastic. You have beds. There's a lot of different. It's important to know that agriculture changes, and with that change can come a different level of intensity and a different level of pesticide use. And then the other fact I wanted to bring up is that agriculture is highly, highly regulated. And there are a lot of, because it's so highly regulated, there's a lot of things agriculture can't do and can't allow in order to stay in business. And so, and I mentioned our pesticide use enforcement program, but also our quarantines for the Wanglong Bing and others. And I'll just move on to that slide right now. So some of the challenges that Ventura County and basically any agricultural county is facing is challenges such as, and these are laws that are outside of our control, right? These are federal laws in many cases, sometimes state laws, and a county can't be less restrictive, right? We can be more restrictive, but we can't be less restrictive than state or federal law. So some of these challenges involve food safety, pesticide use, which I've touched on, and quarantine requirements. So a couple others have mentioned the Food Safety and Modernization Act. So you know, the image we have of the farmer and his dog, well, guess what? The farmer can't have a dog anymore because the dog goes in the orchard and then causes a food safety problem, right? Again, it's a food factory. We are growing food in those orchards on those farms, and so you can't have animals pooping in the fields. I'll be very direct. And that can cause potentially food contamination. Many years ago, there was an outbreak of E. coli in spinach. I don't know if any of you remember this in the Salinas Valley. And that wasn't through any fault of the farmer. They discovered that the outbreak was because of the farm fields are located at the bottom of the valley, and the wild pigs that were running through the hillsides of the Salinas Valley, when the rains came, it washed all of the pig manure into the farm fields. And that's where they discovered the outbreak of E. coli was caused from. So that was nothing to do with the farmer's dog, right? But that had to do with just where they were located and outside contaminants coming in. So food safety is a real challenge and a real issue anywhere that you grow food and anywhere that you bring humans into the picture. Our county just passed where we're putting signage out for the issue of overnight camping because of the potential for our food supply to be contaminated by runoff and waste and trash from those individuals who are camping alongside the roadsides near agriculture. This county has officially recognized that this is a big concern for all of us. And so when you have humans, unimpeded access of humans through farms, this presents a food safety challenge. If you do not have a food safety certification, in many cases, you cannot sell your crop. Some of them are voluntary, but with the Food Safety and Modernization Act, they're not voluntary anymore. It used to be a value added, oh, look how clean my farm is. Now you can't sell your product. And so this is a real concern. And it was such a concern that we brought it to the Board of Supervisors and discussed it. And so the same concern exists in this case. Pesticide use. There are some very stringent laws about pesticide use near schools. You cannot spray within a quarter mile of a school. Why? Because they've identified that young children and the elderly are more susceptible to potential chemical exposure. And so if you have a path where there are school-aged children, I mean, there are laws that prevent and keep farming and pesticide applications away from schools, but yet we could potentially, in this case, be putting children right in the path of active agriculture. So it's these orchards that are currently there, we cannot spray within 100 feet of that path. So that 100 feet of that path is now being exposed to all sorts of pest issues. So those parts will not be farmable. You know, if anyone who's done any gardening, you stamp out a pest infestation as quickly as you can, because if you let it go, you've lost your garden, right? The same is true for farming. And so the application timing has to be dependent on the pest threshold and pressure. And so it can't be timed at, it was the path closed at 6. Okay, now I can spray. Also, the concern of people walking into a pesticide, a field that's been treated with pesticides. So there's, and again, I'm kind of jumbling a few issues together, but with the HLB quarantine, and I mentioned that, you know, citrus was never traditionally sprayed in this county until the onset of Asian citrus psyllid. These orchards are having to be sprayed all the time. And if you want to harvest and move your fruit outside of the quarantine, which is currently in Santa Paula, you have to do 2 mitigations. 1, you have to spray. 2, you have to do a mechanical cleaning. And that has to be done 14 days before harvest. Every time you want to harvest. Lemons are harvested multiple times throughout the year. Avocados are now being harvested more often because they size pick. So they'll be like, oh, okay, the price for the smaller avocados is better right now, or the price for the bigger avocados is better right now. And so they'll come in and get crews to pick based on sizing so that they get a better market price. So traditionally, avocados were harvested once a year, but now they're being harvested more often due to this market situation. Lemons are traditionally harvested 3 times a year. So, there's timing. All of that is the way the laws are written for pesticide use. If a farmer follows all the laws and regulations they're supposed to, that list I went through of all the pesticide use enforcement we do, all of that's done safely. We've come out and checked the environmental conditions. It's not too windy. It's not too this. It's not too that. And they've done that, but someone has trespassed onto their property and gone into their orchard, and they got contaminated with either an active spray or a residual of a spray. The farmer is at fault, even though they followed all the other regulations. The way the laws are written, the farmer is at fault. So that is a big issue, particularly in light of these quarantine requirements. And the quarantine requirements are not, again, it's not a Ag Commissioner specific, Ventura County specific thing. These are imposed upon Ventura County growers by the USDA and CDFA. It's a federal quarantine. And so these are not things that we can change. And historically, with the introduction of Wong Wong Bing, we don't anticipate this quarantine ever being lifted. We've never seen it lifted. And it is really, really, I'm not going to rehash the importance of citrus in our county, but I will remind the audience that this is a deadly disease with no cure. And so there is no way out of it. And we don't see this changing unless all citrus is gone from our county. And I don't think anyone wants to see that in Ventura County. And so kudos to our farming community. We have had the Asian citrus psyllid here for over 15 years now. And we held the insect at bay. I'm sorry, we controlled the insect enough to hold the disease at bay for over 8 years. Generally, the disease follows the insect by 5. And so we were able to hold it off 8 years longer than predicted, which was huge. But why was that? Because the growers worked diligently together and they followed the area-wide spraying campaign. Again, this is the way to control the insect. And so because of those diligent efforts, we were able to keep the insect populations down enough to where we could hold the disease at bay. But unfortunately, the disease is here and it's only spreading. The disease was introduced into our county, or I should say discovered in our county, in October of 2023. Right when I was appointed as Ag Commissioner, I was like, oh, could you have waited a little bit, or, but it was one of those like, welcome to the job, here we go. And so we are now, again, because of these really stringent efforts, we are now up to 126 positive trees in Santa Paula. The trees are removed, and warrants have been issued for both the survey, the treatment, and the removal of these trees. So if anyone has lived in the quarantine, they understand what this is like. CDFA sends notices out, and then if someone refuses survey, treatment, or removal, warrants are issued, and we show up with the CHP and CDFA, and then we accompany them, and the residents are forced to remove the tree or allow treatment or allow survey, depending on what the warrant's listed for. So this is really a big deal. It is happening now, and we don't see it going away. We only see it spreading. And it is spreading, unfortunately. It's moving east in the direction of the bike path. So it's already in Santa Paula. It's moving east to Fillmore. So the quarantine boundary is currently at Toland Park. And so it's a 5-mile radius from every find site in all directions. And so currently it's at Toland Park. So obviously, there are a lot of challenges that agriculture faces in Ventura County in regards to this issue. I brought with me 2 of my staff, David Werda, who's our pest exclusion deputy, who can help answer any questions regarding the quarantine, and also our Deputy John Mikesell, who's in charge of pesticide use enforcement, who can help answer any specific questions on pesticide use enforcement in Ventura County.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very informative. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Corinne, thank you so much. Very helpful. I think it's helpful for all of our commission to understand the processes that our farmers go through and what our Department of Ag does. Currently, we have bike lanes on our county roads that do go through ag land, such as Telegraph. And what's the difference? Because I've been asked by VCTC staff and so forth, what's the difference of spraying the trees off Telegraph versus through the branch line?
is there for community members with this pesticides?
So one could ask, what was the difference between the rail bikes and the train, the passenger train that would go through? And they have differences and similarities. On the rail bike issue, the concern was that people could get off the rail bikes, they could stop, and they could go into an orchard and have a picnic. And that was, there was concerns it would be unimpeded access, right? Well, they've put in requirements where they don't stop, they don't get off, and they don't walk through orchards, and it's monitored. Bike lanes, again, people are riding their bikes through an area versus stopping, picnicking. Bike paths or walking paths are different because people can loiter, people can gather, people have more of a tendency to be able to, or be tempted to walk off the path and enter an orchard. They have to go to the restroom and they think, I'm gonna hide behind a tree. We did get involved in this project when several years ago, and I was asking Shelley if she remembered the year, but our office was asked to do an evaluation of all the pesticides that were being used in the segment between the Piru segment between Fillmore and Piru, and so strawberries are being grown in that area, and we discussed the concerns about it'd be very tempting to be walking along a path, see a strawberry, and go, ooh, that looks really good. Who's gonna know? They've got thousands of strawberries. I'm just gonna go pick a strawberry and eat it, not knowing whether the restricted entry interval had been expired or where you're not allowed to be enter into a treated field because the studies have shown that the chemical residual has not broken down enough to be safe for human contact. Or there's also pre-harvest intervals. So there's periods of time where after you've applied a chemical that you can't harvest because, again, the residual from the chemical is still present enough to potentially cause a health hazard. So that person could easily hop off the trail and go grab a strawberry, get sick, and it would be the farmer's fault. And so one of the things we discussed. CoLab mentioned the idea to help prevent that would be, well, let's make some more robust fences where people can't do that. But the problem was, again, a different public safety hazard, right? It wasn't a food contamination. It was the health and safety of, say, a person becoming a victim from, someone attacking them and they had a tunnel that they couldn't escape. So, sorry, I'm belaboring the answer to your question, but really, there is a difference between moving quickly through an area and walking leisurely, being able to stop and being tempted to go harvest your own guacamole for the night.
And I appreciate that. Many of the commissioners here weren't privy to the meetings we had with Northern Sierra and Ag and VCTC where we had to discuss this. You have a machine that's coming and chopping trees and no one tells you when it's doing. And if you had public access through it, you had brought up the concern, also a flag on the bikes. And I think they agreed, Northern Sierra stated there's a manager that's on every ride to make sure that people weren't wandering or doing anything. And you brought up all those cases. I wanted to make sure that our commission heard that from you. So
right,
I appreciate
and it's not to say that the rail bikes didn't create impacts because farmers are still having to time their spraying around these events. And so, again, spraying is not done by the clock. It's not done by the calendar. It's done by pest threshold. And so if you have to spray when you have to spray, and you can't necessarily wait for the perfect time. And so that is, so to say, so it's not, I want to clarify, it's not to say that there weren't impacts. There were. It's just that there is a difference. There would be a greater concern for even more impacts with the ability to get on and off. And they didn't, luckily, they don't allow that, to my understanding. And I think that, Martin could confirm that. They're not allowed to get off the rail bikes, is my understanding.
That, at one, on the trail, we haven't really had any reports of instances like that.
Okay, well, and they have guides, so, you know,
Yeah.
that could help keep the, but my understanding is that this path is not gonna have full security or guides or not be monitored all the time. And so, again, the idea, there is a larger concern with unimpeded access.
Thank you.
Go ahead, McMartin.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell, for coming today and speaking with us. I just had one, just more of a curiosity question. Are you concerned in the outbreak issue with, I imagine there's, I can't think of how many miles, but there's a lot of miles of public road and bike lane that are right adjacent to Citrus. I can think of 118 between Ventura and Moore Park being one. Are you concerned about that?
Absolutely.
Access?
Anytime there's people in agriculture, we're concerned.
Okay.
And we're out there monitoring because things happen, right? There are laws against drift, but sometimes the wind picks up in Ventura County and suddenly something that was supposed to happen here, you know, it can happen. That's why we have a job. So anytime that you are putting people in agriculture, there is inherent risks. And so I think what we're all talking about risk mitigation, right? And so the more people you put and the longer you put them in there, the bigger the risk.
Well, thank you very much again for that presentation.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Oh, and speaking of letters, the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee, it's been mentioned several times, they have a letter that will address some of these issues as well.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, moving right along to number 14, Sesame Creek Overflow Railroad Bridge Repair Update and Approve Amendment to Consult Services Agreement.
And Chair Judge, just before Amanda starts, at the length of the meeting, I've spoken with several of you about our current challenges with the bridge and the rain and the floods. So I just would ask Amanda, if to the extent possible, and you're welcome to ask as many questions as you want. She's the expert, but we can, we're doing everything we can to keep fixing the bridge.
Would it be feasible to say we put this off to the next meeting, maybe?
Chair Judge, I would respectfully request that the commission hear the item. We do have an amendment request.
Sure.
I can be extremely brief.
Go ahead.
So when we were here in November, we were really, I don't know if enthusiastic is the right word, but we were optimistic about where the project was going. We had just completed the removal of the girders and the demolition of the third pier, which will be reconstructed. And the site had been cleared and dewatered, and the water diversion was in place. We were feeling pretty good. But then since that time, we've had a number of challenges that we've experienced. The first being new engagement by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. On November 10th, we received an email from CDFW expressing concerns over the project's activities in connection with the California Endangered Species Act. They raised a concern about potential for take related in particular to the California Southern Steelhead, and they requested that we stop work pending issuance of an incidental take permit. I just want to be clear that this was not an issue earlier in the year when we originally started the project during the dry season, because it was intended that the fish and other aquatic species would be excluded from the site, but because of some early season storms, the project had to come into contact with these species. So our team worked very, very quickly. I personally wrote most of the application myself to submit an application for an incidental take permit to CDFW. When we first started this, our consultant said, well, these take at least 6 to 8 weeks to prepare. And I said, well, you've got 2 days. So we did that very quickly, and we've been continuing to collaborate with CDFW to receive an incidental take permit. We met with them just yesterday, and there have been some changes, which I'll get into, but I think we're close to reaching an agreement with CDFW on an incidental take permit that will allow work to continue. We did, as I mentioned, complete the girder removal on November 5th and some cleanup work through the 7th. But then we had the storm on the 14th of November. This slide on the right shows the post-storm creek conditions. We did have an inundation of the project site. Unfortunately, the water diversion was just overwhelmed by the amount of rain that we received, which, again, was an early season storm. I didn't realize that was a video, but shows you a little bit of the scale of the water that moved through the project site. And again, those are not before and after. I failed to delete the references there, but those are both post-storm conditions after the November 14th storm. In between the November 14th storm, again, we were working on the incidental take permit application, allowing the site to dry out, doing stormwater pollution prevention program compliance efforts like clearing out any of the plastics or pieces of the water diversion material that were damaged by the storm, and just continuing to try to clean up the site and get ready for when we could actually begin the work. We were also, part of the incidental take permit application was we needed to have our contractor develop and our team review the water diversion plans. The initial water diversion plans, again, were not sufficient to contain the level of flows, so the team came up with a new plan that went into the application and was being considered by CDFW. But then, of course, we had another even more significant storm around Christmas. These photos show the sort of waxing and waning of the river flows there on the site. On the left, that shows the railroad right-of-way, and then on the right, the photos show Old Telegraph Road. And unfortunately, because the without the railroad bridge abutment there to protect it, Old Telegraph Road was at risk and sustained significant damage that now the county is working to correct. One of the other big concerns is the girders. I mentioned they were removed on November 5th, but because of the CDFW stop work order and the November 14th storm, we didn't have time to get the girders out of the water call or out of the riverbed. So the team went in and put some, you can see some of the posts standing up. They surrounded the girders with very heavy super sacks full of material, strapped them all together to make sure that they didn't move downstream and cause additional damage either to the railroad bridge or Old Telegraph Road or other infrastructure downstream. So thankfully that held. The girders became, as you can see, really buried by sediment in the riverbed. So we will need to continue to monitor the placement of those girders and make sure they don't move. And this chart shows the storm flows that we experienced. The blue line is since October. The blue line shows first the storm in October, then the second storm in November, which went up to 3,000 cubic feet per second. And then if you'll notice the scale on the chart has to increase dramatically because this December 24th through the 26th storm, the stream flows were exponentially greater. I understand from our team that was about a 5-year storm. So pretty significant storm flows that went through the site. The line that's kind of more brownish, greenish along the bottom was the same time period from last year. So you can see the pretty dramatic difference between October through December of 2024 compared to this year. Unfortunately, we've had a very rainy, flashy river year. These are the post-storm conditions. This is preliminary, but all of the area that is shown in blue is eroded during the last storm. And so we lost about another 30 feet of bank in this last storm. We've looked at options for next steps, kind of the two major options. Really three options. One would be to do nothing. Two would be to continue with the construction to put up the proposed water diversion and to try to continue with the construction that we thought we could do even just a few weeks ago. The third would be to stabilize the bank and come back in the dry season as soon as we're able to get back in the creek after the winter storm flows have subsided. That second option to just continue with the water diversion as designed, unfortunately, we don't believe that it would be effective. The December 24th storms, the storm flows went up to about 440 feet elevation, whereas the water diversion was designed for 436 feet. So it's possible that the water diversion, even if it had been installed, would have been inundated. So our construction management team does not feel like that is sufficient to address the storm flows, particularly if we were to get some more significant flows coming forward. And we're just now getting into the time where it would normally be a rainy season. So what the contractor's proposing and what we staff have recommended is or at least what we're further exploring, and the contractor's developing additional details on this, but would be a bank stabilization that would tie into the existing H-pile wall that was constructed last year and continue down to connect to the county's temporary emergency repairs for Old Telegraph Road. Those would be very, very large riprap, 4 tons each rock, keyed in together to try to help push the water where it belongs in the water column and away from the bank so we don't continue to have erosion. And then that enables us to come back in the dry season. We do think the good news is that we believe as long as the designers sign off on this, that we could reuse that rock for the permanent repair. So it wouldn't be like an additional cost, at least not an unreasonable additional cost would be minimized if we were to pursue this path. So this is the path we're currently going down. We do need to work with CDFW. They've initially indicated that an incidental take permit would not be required for this work. They're still, reviewing and evaluating it, but it sounds like we're going to be able to do this immediate stabilization work without the ITP, and then we can work with them to secure the ITP for the additional water diversion work to complete the project. So this is an update of the timeline. I've left our completing the work as to be determined because, again, it's still sort of fluid at this point. But we are asking, and the reason I appreciate you sticking with me here another 10 minutes is that the proposed amendment does provide some additional resources, in particular to prepare the incidental take permit and then to comply with those requirements. And this would all be as part of an amendment to our contract with RailPros for construction management. So the recommendation is on the screen and before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And also, our construction manager, Dan Thompson from RailPros, is here. He's been sticking with us for these 3 hours. So if you have any questions for him and the CM team, we can answer those as well.
Thank you. Before we take any questions, I always want to clarify on this. It shows as a receive and file, but we have to vote on this, correct? Yeah.
Yes, you do. And the agenda item does reflect in the second bullet that there is an approval action.
Great. All right, then I'll take questions.
Can I ask a question? Hopefully it's quick. So based on the storms, it seems that the creek is fanning out more. Is there any discussion in dredging underneath those bridges to some historic level to ensure that the water flow will be at that location versus keep going? We know that there's properties that have been taken as well as what you were talking about.
So as part of our design contract to actually develop the plans for the bridge, there is a component where there's a subcontract to a geomorphology firm called Ayers and Associates. They're really experts in how water moves and how that is related to, and its relationship of the water movement to infrastructure. So they've been working for a year on plans to provide some longer term mitigation for the river. They've looked at a whole host of strategies. They have developed some draft strategies that they're for doing further modeling. And so we're not at the point where we have those final recommendations that we would bring to the commission, but that's still in progress. That is a much bigger project than anything that would be VCTC's either authority or responsibility or capacity. So we need to be a partnership with the County of Ventura to undertake that. So, so yes, those there are a variety of options being considered. Dredging isn't necessarily one of them, but there are different like armoring and natural and a whole bunch of other strategies.
Well, and the reason why I ask for that is with Cayugas Creek, we have to dredge. And I think that this location, based on what we've seen, I don't think you can just say no. And so I would like to make sure that that's evaluated as well. And I do appreciate so much that you're working with the county staff on this because it is, and the cities, because this is really a huge issue for our constituents. And I really appreciate the work on this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's, was it, okay, we good? All right. Okay, so we have a first and a second. Go ahead. Excuse me, call for the vote.
Just to clarify the vote, I have a first from Commissioner MacArthur and a second from Commissioner Tremblay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brogy,
Yes.
Commissioner Crosswhite,
Yes.
Commissioner Enegren,
Yes.
Commissioner Engler,
Yes.
Commissioner Halter, Commissioner Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner MacArthur, Commissioner Parvin, Commissioner Tremblay, Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair McQueen Lejeune,
Yes.
Chair Judge.
Yes. And I want to thank staff for this,
Thank you.
for the diligence you've put into this very, very frustrating project. Thank you. All right, moving along, we're going to go to our general counsel report.
No reports from the General Counsel.
Thank you very much. Agency reports, I'll make mine short. I've emailed Roxana my statement from the last SCAG meeting. We didn't have too much, we didn't have a transportation meeting at the last SCAG meeting. It was a joint session of all the committees, but they did give me, we had posted some stuff that we're going to do in February, so you should be receiving that by email. Now I'll move on to the Southern California Regional Rail Authority, Metrolink.
Given the lateness of the hour, Mr. Chairman, well, let's defer on that.
Okay. And right along to the LoSAN report. Commissioner White?
I'll second the motion that I will not speak
All right.
anymore about LoSAN for the moment.
All right. And how about the Coastal Rail Coordinating Council?
Same thing.
All
No
right.
report.
And the California Association of Councils of Government, Commissioner Crosswhite?
Just real quick, I wanted to let you know that CalCog is exploring the formation of a 501c3 foundation so that they could do more education. And so that will be an ongoing conversation. I'll let you know how that all developed, but wanted to let you know that that was being looked at. The conversation about SB 375 modernization continues. And it's so because of the hour, what I will say about that is that they are trying to find someone to carry a bill. They were trying to find other ways to get there, but think that at this point, that's probably their best option because the other proposal was for the state to prepare some draft guidelines by the end of this year that would be given to the next administration to see what they wanted to do with them. So there is at least an effort. We'll know soon because I think January is the deadline for those bills to be submitted. So we'll know soon whether or not there's going to be a bill related to SB 375 reform. The big piece that they're kind of looking at is changing the horizon. Right now, you have to do it every 4 years. And so they really want to look at that happening every 8 years so that you have the extra time to implement. Just the 4 largest MPOs in the county or in the state spend so much money on all of those cycles that you could do the equivalent of an implementation of REAP 1 with the amount of money that it costs just to do the planning. So that's what they're going to be trying to find someone to carry a bill on. We'll see if it moves forward. And then just wanted to let you all know that March 9th through 11th in Long Beach is the CalCog Regional Leadership Forum. Early registration discount is until January 31st. If you're interested, there's more information available on the CalCog website. So thank you.
Thank you. California Van Pool Authority, again, Commissioner White.
Yes, thank you. Briefly, we have 321 van pools operating throughout the state. We serve 20 counties. We serve 70 cities. In the county of Ventura, we had 260 trips just in the month of November. This is a big deal. And so we provide a lot of people transportation that takes them out of their cars and into our vans. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. And this is my last meeting as your chair. I want to thank you. It was my honor and pleasure to serve as your chair. Thank you for making this the longest meeting I've ever had to chair. But it was very informative also. So thank you very much for all of that. And we are adjourned until Friday, February 6th. You're back here. Have a great week.